Welcome to the inaugural edition of the Ultimate Weigh-In Show. Yes, this is your new home for 9 p.m. Eastern on Friday nights. We're giving you our thoughts at the end of the weigh-ins, letting you guys know our final thoughts on the fights coming up tomorrow for the UFC. And normally it's on a different channel, right? But this is going to be your new home. We're going to have a different panel of guests coming on every single week to give you guys the best breakdowns that we can possibly give you. And it's a great way for you guys to get other perspectives and other views from predictors and cappers you may not have heard of from in the past. And I can't wait to bring these guys on the show with me and introduce them to you guys. So let's just get it going right off the bat. We'll go with probably the A side of the show today. We got my guy DFS by the numbers. Brady, what's going on, my dude?
What's up, Locke? Thanks for having me on. And what a crew we have tonight. John, me, you, Sun Tzu. I'm loving it. I'm loving these fights. 13 fight card. We're supposed to have 15, but can't wait to talk some bets with you guys and make some money.
For sure. I'm really excited for this one. And I knew DFS had to be one of those first guys that we had on the show. I'm glad that we got my guy Brady on. Next up, we got my guy Joe, a.k.a. Sun Tzu, Mr. MMA Women's Whisperer himself. He even created a group for me and another guy just to talk women's MMA. Joe, what's going on, my man?
No, I am so honored to be on the inaugural broadcast. I have to say, it's not too often I feel like the last man in line at a buffet, but like this is what I'm kind of feeling like here. So it's like, even though it was due to a cancellation, thank you, Newsom. That PayPal is coming. So I appreciate being added. I'm a little upset that my girl Erin isn't going to get the fight on this card, but other than that, I am very much looking forward to this, especially coming off a hiatus.
Yeah, for sure. I was really excited for that one, and I'm sure a lot of people were waiting to see that badonk in the cage, courtesy of Mrs. Norma Dumont, but that's not going to be happening tomorrow night. They're probably going to have to wait for a couple months now. But let's round out this crew. We got my guy, John Stargarian from the Club and Sub podcast. John, what's going on, my dude?
What's going on, man? Preet, thanks for having me on. I'll be honest, I have a lot of plays this week. I think they're going to be a bit unpopular. It's going to be a little sweatier than usual, but yeah, I mean, that's how I like it. And also, Joe, you think you can get me in that WMMA chat?
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I'm pumped about it.
For sure. No, if I know anybody that's going to be taking shots on dogs with even a little bit of a chance, it's my guy, John Stargarian down there. So make sure you guys follow him on Twitter. He has his Twitter handle there. Everybody pretty much has their Twitter handle under themselves right there. So let's not waste too much time. We got a 13-fight slate here. It was originally scheduled for 15 fights earlier this week. We had the Kyle Daukaus fight fell off. And then this morning we had, Aaron Blanchfield and Norma Dumont fall off. But we still got 13 fights, right? We're normally used to pre-COVID, we're used to 12 to 13 fights per card. So this is just a normal. Let's all knock on wood and make sure that this 13 fights stay on. I know my guys Sun Tzu and Brady are those 150 lineup guys on the DFS. So I'm sure they're hoping that they don't have to rejig anything come fight time. But let's get this thing on the road right off the bat. So I'll kick things off. We got the first fight of the night. We got Impa Kasanganay versus Sasha Palatnikov. And this is why we do a show like the Ultimate Weigh-In Show, is for cases like Impa Kasanganay, who's making his debut at 170 pounds in the UFC. And to be honest, I don't know about you guys, but I thought he looked kind of bad on the scales. Probably the most noticeably bad, worse on the scales, right? He was slow to get to the scale. He was slow getting off the scale, slow getting off the stage. And you got to believe that's going to have an effect on him here. Not to mention the fact that it's an early start time for the card. So they normally have, 36 hours-ish to kind of rehydrate and get their fluids back in their body. But Impa Kasanganay is the first fight on the card. You're talking about 8:30 a.m. East or local time that they're gonna have to get on the scale. So he doesn't have as much time to get that fluid back in his body. How much of an effect is that going to have on him? And I'm starting to think it's going to have a little bit, right? I'm not one that truly believes wholeheartedly in the whole, okay, if they look bad at the weigh-ins, they're going to perform bad on the scale or on fight night. The one that comes to mind the most recently was Ketlin Vieira versus Yana Kunitskaya, where you visibly see Ketlin Vieira slowing down in that fight, and that might happen here with Impa Kasanganay. Technically speaking, I think he's a much better fighter here. He does have a good range fighting game, distance striking game. Outside of that highlight reel KO that he had against Joaquin Buckley back in October, he's had a perfect career pretty much. I'm just concerned about his durability. I'm concerned about what his gas tank is going to look like the further this fight goes. And we know Sasha Palatnikov is durable. He took some big shots from Luis Cosi in his debut, and then he ended up springing the upset in that third round with a beautiful TKO finish, showing his resiliency and his durability. And he could probably pull that off here. He might take a shit kicking for the first 2 rounds or so, but how is that third round going to look? Impa Kasanganay is not a notable killer or a notable finisher, so he's probably going to go 15 minutes here. I'm still ending up on the Impa Kasanganay side. I feel like his technical skills are going to be too much here for Sasha Palatnikov, and I'm hoping, knock on wood, that it does end up going the full 15 minutes and he's able to stay conscious. With that said, I'm not willing to shell out the minus, 280, minus 300 on this guy. I think that's a little bit too much. Let's see how he rebounds from that loss, and then let's start laying the chalk on him or putting him in parlays. But as of right now, I don't really want to do that. Brady, how are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said for the most part. And I saw the weigh-ins as well. Impa did not look great. He looked kind of sucked out. So that could be a factor here. The way I look at it is, I don't know. I saw a prop that I thought was off, Impa by KO plus 600. And that's just because Palatnikov has been finished in both of his fights. He was just about finished by Luis Kosuke. And I don't know, Impa has not shown a finish on his record by strikes. And that is a big concern. But like I said, Sasha, he could have just about been finished 3 times in 8 fights there. So I'm going to take a small shot on the Impa by KO. I was thinking maybe the come down to 170, the power could start to translate, and maybe those KOs start to come, because when you watch this guy, it looks like he throws hard. These guys just aren't falling down. So instead of paying the minus 300, I took a really small stab at the plus 600 KO prop. As far as the money line goes, yeah, probably too wide, man. I'm especially seeing the weigh-ins. And even after seeing the weigh-ins, maybe the under could be a good look if he is really sucked out. Sasha, decent finisher himself. And both guys have never lost by decision. So I took a small shot on the KO prop. Maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. But I really did think that plus 600 was off there.
Yeah, if Impa's cardio does come into question here, that you guys know I love me some round 3 props. You got plus 20 on 100 on Palatnikov to win inside round 3 if that does end up transpiring. Joe, how are you seeing this one?
Yeah, so yeah, I agree. He looked probably, other than Dumont, looked the worst on the scales. And how impressive was that last performance? I mean, you got to love a guy with both cardio and a chin, which is what you got out of Sasha. Look, I'm not targeting this fight either for betting or for DraftKings all that much. I suspect that where I'll have ownership on DraftKings, it will be more slanted towards the dog here. But if I was looking at a bet, I might be tempted at Sasha by decision plus 450. That seems like it might be worthwhile. It's kind of a wait and see thing for me. I mean, obviously, a knockout for the decade contender with
once in a
Buckley.
lifetime.
Yeah, that's something that you kind of got to live down. So I'm willing to wait a fight to see if this guy has anything. And yeah, I'll have some ownership, but I'm looking more at the dog here just based on his last performance and how poor Impa looked on the scales.
So you're going with Palatnikov as your official prediction for this
fight? If I had to make a pick here,
that's what we're here for, Joe.
I'd go with the dog. All
right, perfect. John, I know you were one of the few guys that actually went out there and faded Impa Kasanganay last time around and cashed on that big ticket with Joaquin Buckley. How are you seeing this one for Impa this time?
Yeah, so to talk about Impa as an investment, I would say I'm long on Impa long-term down the road. I'm fairly short on him now. Like you just mentioned, I played Buckley pretty confidently against him in his last fight. And I guess, I like some of the tools Impa brings to the table. Obviously great athleticism so far, and we'll see what happens with the weight cut. But so far his cardios look great. He seemed durable outside of that nuclear kick, but I don't think, his striking is getting better. He keeps a high output, but I don't think he's particularly technical, and he is extremely hittable. He has virtually no defense at all, and I think there's some grappling holes. And so, Palatnikov, look, I mean, that was a fun fight to fight with Kosi, but let's be honest, that guy had no interest in playing defense either.
No.
So it's I don't really rate Palatnikov particularly much, but it is kind of a fight that I think is going to be pretty much swung on in the middle. It's 2 guys swinging at each other, and I expect, unless Impa nukes him, and he hasn't, to Brady's point, shown really that kind of power so far in the UFC. Maybe that changes here. But I kind of expect, I'd lean Impa, but I think it's going to be pretty competitive. And I think Sasha is going to have success here. I think he has a chance to have some success with the wrestling. I haven't bet him. I've been considering it, but I really wanted plus 300. And it seems like after the weigh-in today, it's going the other way. I think Impa's the rightful favorite, but yeah, I don't think he is nearly defensively sound enough or technical offensively enough to justify a minus 270 price tag. So he's my pick, but I think, the value is clearly on Sasha here.
For sure. I like that angle as well. It's hard to back Impa Kasanganay at such a wide line. All right, let's move things along. Next up, we got Da Un Jung versus William Knight, the 9-1 William Knight against the 13-2-1 Da Un Jung. Brady, I'll let you kick this one off. How are you saying this one?
Yeah, speaking of the wins, I mean, like, I expected Da Un Jung to be bigger, but I did not expect all of that. Like, that was pretty crazy. And I was kind of already leaning Jung, not really confident, but early in the week. But now I do like him, but I don't like the price tag minus 135. I do like this. I feel like this could be a competitive fight. I feel like it should be lined 50-50, but it's up. All to is William Knight going to be able to get Da Un Jung down. And from what we've seen, haven't really seen many people try to take down Da Un Jung outside of Mcdessey Ibragimov, who was, gassed out, took him down like 4 times, although he was doing the right things, threatening with submissions, and he was able to get up every time he took him down. Getting taken down 4 times by Cadiz is not the best look, but I do think Da Un Jung stuffs the takedowns. He's absolutely huge and keeps him on the feet, and ultimately does probably catch William Knight at some point. Knight, his striking defense is not there, his striking's not there. But this is a fight I'm more looking forward to from the DraftKings side, and we're all DraftKings guys. This is a fight I'm going to be playing both sides. But from a betting standpoint, I'm not going to put any money on this one. But I do like Jung to get the knockout, but not confident in it.
I like it. Joe, how are you seeing this one, buddy?
Yeah, so I like Knight here. I actually think Jung's size works against him. In the way that Knight's 7.8K on DraftKings, right? He's plus 111 on DraftKings Sportsbook. His last fight, he had 4 takedowns, 1 reversal, and 7 minutes and 39 seconds of control time. I will take that performance. He only landed 38 significant strikes, but I'll take 86 points at 7.8K. So I like him here. I think the small octagon works in his favor. We all know that this guy is built like the proverbial brick shithouse. He is a strong guy, and I really do think that Jung's size works against him with how Knight plays. So I like Knight here. Look, I'll have shares of Jung. I was not super impressed with him, especially in his fight against Alvey. I like the takedowns here. I think it's great for DraftKings. You really want those grappling points. You really want control time. So give me Knight here. That's my official pick. And he's a guy I will be targeting for DraftKings.
Yeah, this one was easily the most comical stare down at the weigh-ins this morning. I was very much looking forward to it just for that aspect. John, how are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, so I was fairly certain pre-tape that I was going to bet Jung. And at that point, he was like minus 110, somewhere around there. And then I looked at it, and Brady touched on it a bit. Cadiz took him down 4 times, and it's not just that he took him down, totally gassed out, death gassed. Cadiz managed to drag him to the mat, and that's a big concern for me. And I echo some of Brady's thoughts. I don't think Knight. It's funny because he's kind of cultivated a reputation of having this being a really dangerous striker on the feet, whereas I don't really see it at all standing. I think his striking is fairly low level regional, and he has no defense, but. With that said, he has a good process, and he's not going to stand at range, and he's going to go forward. And I just haven't seen enough of, 1, Jung sticking and moving laterally, or 2, stopping takedowns. The limited footage I've seen of it is him getting taken down. And so it's I kind of think this fight's going to be very, very binary. It's going to play out with one side's going to look as a big favorite. And by that, I mean, if Jung can stop the takedowns, he's going to light Knight up here. I'm pretty confident in that. But if he can't, I think Knight's going to be able, using submissions to get back up is great against bad grapplers. I don't think Knight's a great wrestler, but I do think he's heavy on top. And I kind of think trying to threaten with submissions to get up here is just going to end up with him being in worse positions. And so I kind of think it's either Knight can hit the takedowns or he can't. If he can't, he's going to get lit up. And if he can, he's going to dominate this fight. I guess for a pick, I'll go with Knight just because of the uncertainty in Jung's takedown defense. But I'm not particularly confident either way. The confidence interval on this fight is next to nothing for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It is a very tough fight to call, hence why the odds are as close as they are. But I am going to actually lean with Knight as well. So we got 3-1 for Knight here. But yeah, it's pretty binary, like John was saying, right? You got Jung, who's probably going to have the striking advantage. I'd be very surprised if you see William Knight try to play on the feet with him. He has so much range to cover here that it's going to be very hard for him to do that without getting hit with a very big bomb by Jung, who can definitely throw some big power in his shots. The Tufan and Chukwi fight is obviously the only one that he's been stopped stopped. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally thought that was a little bit of a quick stoppage. Like, I wish we could have seen that fight go on a little bit longer, considering, you know, we had two behemoths in that fight. They're pretty much built the same too, right? You'd have to give Nchukwi the advantage in the striking or pure striking realm there. But man, that would have been so much more fun to see if they let it go on a little bit more. But yeah, I got Knight here. I think he's going to close the distance very well. Again, that Hadisi Bragima fight, just John especially, you know how I feel about Hadis. I'm not a big fan of the guy. So if he was having that type of fight with our guy Da Un Jung, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to deal with the grappling onslaught that's going to be coming here for William Knight, who, again, just in that Alexa Kimura fight, right off the bat, he goes for the takedowns, and I'm expecting to do the same thing right here. I expect Da Un Jung to be prepared for that, but that doesn't mean that you're always going to stop it, right? You can prepare as much as you want, but Khabib is going to keep taking you down. William Knight's going to keep getting a hold of you and start to take you down as well too. So I'm looking forward to the fight just to see this puzzle solved, but I am going to be leaning with Knight as well. And I think the underdog money is not too bad, but this fight could absolutely be a dumpster fire and a shit show as soon as the bell rings. All right. Let's move on to the next fight. We got a contender series vet making his debut. Again, we got Luis Saldana going up against Jordan Griffin. Joe, I'll let you kick this one off, buddy.
Yeah. Who has Saldana actually fought? I was looking at his record, and I actually have a Carl Wittsock signed poster. Don't ask me how I got it, but when I ultimately build out my lock-like studio, it's one of the fight posters I'll actually have to put up. But you know, who has he actually fought? I mean, you know, that's my concern here. Yes, Griffin is underperformed, but his competition has been a lot better. You know, trains at Rufus Sport, which you know, I like. You know, he's not really giving up size. You know, he's 5'10", Saldana's 5'11". I don't, you know, again, I have this at worst, a pick'em fight. My pick is going to be Griffin in terms of who I like to win. I also like Griffin a bit on DraftKings. I think he can get some grappling and control points on DraftKings. So I'm going to take Griffin here just because I don't know what to expect from Saldana, and I'm going to kind of lean towards, you know, the class in the camp here, which is Griffin and Rufus Sport.
Yeah, I think our guy John actually has a bet here. John, let us know what it is and how you feel about this matchup.
Yeah, Joe actually echoed a lot of my thoughts here. I bet Griffin at plus 125. My thinking is kind of, so I have this philosophy that is generally guys coming into the UFC, especially who have fought poor competition and look good against it, are either going to be good or they'll be bad. But generally, there's no way to know until you see them take that step up. And more often than not, you know, if you look at it in terms of tiers, how many guys are bad, good, or average, good, they're bad. I think it's a kind of a good philosophy to live by. And so like, you know, Saldana strikings look nice, but I haven't seen him against anybody that I'd really impress me. And so, like, I'm inclined to think it's probably not as good as it's looked. You know, obviously there's not a ton of tape on him out there, but the bit I've seen of him grappling has not been great. And, you know, Jordan Griffin, look, I am not a huge Jordan Griffin fan at all. I bet Yusuf Zalal against him. Haven't been impressed with his run in the UFC. But the reality is, you know, he had a competitive fight with Chaz Scaly, who, you know, while Scaly might not be the best athlete, the guy stuck around forever. He's a tricky guy to make your game work. He had a competitive fight with Dan Ige, who's a top 10 guy at featherweight now. You know, Griffin's going out there. You know, he beat Derek Minner. He's having good fights and giving good fighters a tough time. And, you know, he is, for as meme as his striking is and some of his submissions have been, you know, he is a guy who you can trust is going to try to grapple you. And given, you know, the minimal tape I've seen of Saldana, it hasn't looked good. And so, you know, it's possible he's made those improvements in the couple years since. But, like, I don't know that. And again, like, the confidence interval is low here, so it's a small bet, just one unit. But, like, I'm willing to take the gamble on the UFC vet with 5 fights who's fought pretty stiff competition in his career that he's going to be able to get it done against the guy who's fought mostly trash.
Yeah, I'm echoing the same sentiments for you, John. I do like Griffin here too. Again, he's 1-3 in his UFC run, but those guys that he's fighting are high-level grapplers himself. Like, he's a grappler himself, but if you're going up against guys like Dan Ige and Chaz Skelly, that Chaz Skelly fight was probably one of the best fights I've ever seen in terms of just back and forth grappling, a lot of reversals, a lot of submission attempts. And unfortunately for Griffin, he wasn't the one able to get his hand raised that night. But yeah, it's been a very rough stretch for him. And then again, Yusuf Zalal as well, another tough out for him. But I feels like Saldana is a guy that if he can get his striking game going, he needs to be at distance. He needs to be playing that distance striking game. He's going to have trouble. And I feel like we've seen him, get submitted by much lesser competition. We've seen him get taken down by much lesser competition. And Jordan Griffin, from a great training camp in Rufus Sport, I think he has the ability to mix up his MMA game very well here, and then eventually close the distance and get that takedown. I don't know about you guys. Maybe I'm reading into a little bit more. He didn't look the greatest either on the scales, like not Impa Kasanganai levels, but I still felt like there were some issues that probably, weren't clear as day, but it just seemed like he was a little bit more sucked out and drained than he has, at least on his Contender Series weigh-in. So yeah, I'm going to be going with Griffin here as well. I think he's live for a potential submission too. If I'm not mistaken, I believe on the Propping You Up show that I did last night, it was plus 490 for him to win by submission. I think that's not a bad sprinkle at all if you think he has success in the grappling realm, which I think exactly he will. Brady, how are you seeing this one go down?
Yeah, it looks like we're all lining up on the dog, and I agree with Joe. I think this should be probably lined to pick him because Jordan Griffin's going to come out here if he comes in with the right game plan of getting the takedowns and like John said, like from the stuff we've seen, Saldana, his takedown defense does not look great, his grappling does not look great. And yeah, I saw that prop as well. I got it early in the week, plus 650. I thought that line was so off because you look through the record of Jordan Griffin. When he's winning by submission. And you guys mentioned as well, he's fighting really good guys. I don't think Griffin's won a decision since like 2015, 2014. It's been a while, but when he's winning, he's finishing fights and he's finishing them by submission. And Saldana has been submitted in 2 of his losses. So yeah, I thought that prop was off. Even where it's at now, like plus 490, I think that's off. So I happily put a little bit on that. But yeah, I like Griffin here. I like your bet, John. I do think you're going to get a little bit of value there, plus 120. And hopefully Griffin does get it done because I'll have a decent amount on DraftKings, 7,600. Hopefully gets it done by submission.
Yeah, my DFS show that I did earlier this week, I did give him out as my dog of the night play, as I felt like he probably was going to be very successful with his takedowns, his control time, and then very high ceiling of potentially getting a finish here against Luis Saldana. All right, let's move on to the next fight. This one I'm very much looking forward to. There's going to be a lot of questions answered here about our guy Jack Shore. Jack Shore is going up against Hunter Azure. A steady money coming in on Jack Shore throughout the week. Opened up pretty much at a pick'em. Went all the way down to about minus 175. Now he's up to about minus 165. John, how are you liking this one?
Yeah, I bet Shore when he was at about minus 124. I actually don't really like the current line, to be honest, for Shore. I guess what I'm thinking is I do think Shore has a pretty clear skills advantage pretty much everywhere. Like even in the striking, I just think Shore is a bit more technical than Azure is. But Azure has a pretty substantial athleticism advantage here and a pretty substantial speed advantage. And so, I kind of think the first 5 to 7 minutes of this fight are going to be pretty dicey for sure. Azure's fast and he hits very hard. And so, he made Brian Kelleher look really bad. And while, I think Shore's probably better than Kelleher, I don't know that for a fact. Kelleher is a lot more tested than he is. And so, I kind of think early on it's probably going to be tough for Shore to get the takedown. And so Azure finishing Shore early wouldn't shock me. All of that said, the reason I played Shore is this. We saw Brad Katona give Azure a lot of issues in the clinch. We saw Cole Williams give Azure a lot of issues in the clinch. I know, and I've seen people say it, Azure pops right up, but he gives his back to get up every time. Shore, if he gets on top of him, Shore's top game is way better than anything Azure's seen. He's probably going to put hooks in and flatten him out. I'm pretty convinced that once Shore lands a takedown, he's going to punish Azure pretty bad, whether that's a submission or a ground and pound. And Shore has a far more reliable gas tank. And so I guess for me, I'm a bit nervous that Azure could knock him out or do significant damage early. But I kind of think once Shore can close distance and get takedowns, there's going to be a noticeable shift in tempo and momentum where he kind of just takes over the fight. So I think Shore's aside. I think the line now is more or less accurate. But yeah, I have a small play item at minus 124.
Yeah, I do like me some Shore here as well. This was kind of one that I circled when they initially announced it because I did fade Azure last time around with Cole Smith. I thought the line was a little bit too wide at the time. I believe I got him around plus 200, and I was expecting to be a grapple fest just exactly as it was. And I thought Azure's gas tank would fail him, and it kind of did. Unfortunately for Cole Smith, his cardio seemed to start to fail him a little bit, even though he had some very dominant positions against Hunter Azure in that fight. I believe he had his back for almost a minute and a half to 2 minutes near the ending of that fight. I feel like if it's Jack Shore in that position, though, you're going to have much better cardio. You're going to have the higher ceiling of a potential finish there, which is why on the Propping You Up show last night, I gave that Jack Shore round 3 prop out to you guys. Plus 1,500, I think, is a very solid spot against a guy that has very questionable gas tank issues like Hunter Azure. Now, John, you're absolutely right. Skill for skill, when we're talking about wrestling, Hunter Azure has him absolutely beat here. But when you don't have the gas tank to fuel that skill, then you're going to get outworked by a guy like Jack Shore. He reminds me exactly. I guess they're both Welsh. Him and Brett Johns, right? They have a very similar game plan. They have a very similar style where they just go in there and they drown you. He does technically have the slightly better boxing here, whereas Hunter Azure has that that quintessential wrestling striking style, which is just long or wide winging hooks and overhand rights and all that stuff. It's just to close the distance, try to get you down, and then drag this into pull away with a decision here. So yeah, I think it is dicey for about 5 to 7 minutes, like you were saying. And if Hunter is able to get that second round, then yeah, things get very sweaty in that third round. But I do trust a guy like Jack Shore, who seems to have a very good gas tank to go out there and potentially get that third round finish for us. So I do lean Shore here. I think he'll be the one that's again better gas tank, just like the Brad Katona and Cole Smith's fight. I see them playing out very identical, but it's that round and a half mark where things are gonna start to shift in Shore's favor, just as they did in the Katona and Smith fights. But Shore is just going to be way more energetic, way more fuel in the tank, and ready to go to put a hurting on Hunter Azure. So I'm going to be going with Jack Shore to get. I'm going to say a submission finish in that third round. Give us the back again, Hunter Azure. I dare you. Give us the back again, and we're going to stick at that choke and get our round 3 prop victory for Jack Shore. Brady, how are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I feel like I'm one of the very few out there that don't have a bet on Jack Shore this week, but I will pick him. I would have loved to get the opener minus 110. That'd have been fantastic. But yeah, where the line's at now, I'm just going to pass. But yeah, I see what you guys are seeing. I think that Azure's takedown defense is very, very good, but it's only very, very good for about a round and a half. And once Shore does get that takedown, I do think the sub is very, very live. Shore is very good finisher, like a 93% finish rate. So I'm with you, Locke. I like that third round prop. That's something I might be looking into, especially if it's still around the plus 1,500. But yeah, I do expect him to kind of drain the gas tank of Azure. And we've seen more than once where Azure looks very good early, but once it gets into round 2 and round 3, guys are finally able to take him down, hold him down. And once Shore gets him down, I think the sub is very, very live. So give me Jack Shore. One of my favorite plays on DraftKings, honestly. And I might be looking at that third round prop with you.
Perfect. Joe, how are you seeing this one? You going to round it out? Is it going to be unanimous here? What's up?
I guess I'm going to complete the super factor here.
Hey, let's do it.
Friends don't let friends bet fighters who were finished by Brian Boom. So I have got to go with the Welsh Habib here.
Nice.
And Jack Shore. I actually stole that from either Cody or Paul. So props. I got to give them credit for that. The Welsh Habib. Look, he's got 12 to 13x potential on DK. I do think he's going to be very popular. 8.7K salary. Scored over 100 points in his 2 DraftKings wins. I like him. I think he's a target. Look, Azure is athletic, but if he can't control his athleticism and it doesn't correlate to multi-round cardio, I don't really know what value there is in being athletic. You could be the most athletic guy and still lose. So anyway, I'll complete the super factor here. You guys gave the great technical reasons why. I'll just say that I like Shore, and I think he'll probably be a target with fairly high ownership on DraftKings.
Perfect. I love to hear that from you guys. A unanimous decision pretty much here for Jack Shore. Let's move on to the next fight, which I am labeling shit show number 1 of the card. We got Jung Castro going up against a guy, George's Man Mountain Danho, making his return after a long layoff. Not to mention a very tumultuous first couple fights in the UFC. He has that technical majority decision loss to Daniel Mialanchuk, and then where he thinks he's going to get a DQ probably because he just ended up quitting. I believe it was in the third round where he got blowed by a low shot. And then in the Christian Colombo fight, starts playing the game a little bit too much, and then gets hit with a draw there with Christian Colombo getting a point taken away. I don't want any part of this fight. Let's be honest. On the Propping You Up show last night, we said the best spot is probably the over 1.5. This might be a slow slugging fight where these guys aren't able to finish each other. My issue here though is with Castro. If he brings that leg kicking game back that he had in the Contender Series, he could probably run through Danho right here, right? Not to mention the fact that he's going to have his back up against the wall. I think it's going to be very tough to consider that he's just going to let this fight pass him by, right? It's historically speaking, though, if you watch his last 2 fights, it's very hard to lay down the minus 310 on him. Like he doesn't seem assertive. He doesn't seem like he has any alert level about him where he wants to go out there and actually get the victory. Like that first round against Greg Hardy was decent. I think a couple of judges actually ended up scoring for Hardy, but I didn't mind what we saw from him. He was actually throwing. He was giving us calf kicks. He was giving us leg kicks. He was throwing some combinations out there. And as soon as that second round hit, the guy just went down to shit. Exactly what happened in the Carlos Felipe fight. He got out-volumed in that fight. That third round was probably the most frustrating third round. If anybody tried laying the chalk there on minus 250 on Jurgen Castro, whether it was straight or a parlay, it's just too tough to back him here. With that said, technically speaking, he's the much better fighter here, right? Man Mountain is far from what the nickname makes you think this guy is. The guy seems to have about 2 minutes of cardio to go out there and try to take your head off, but it seems what he likes to do most is try to take his opponents down and just smash their face through the canvas. But if he's not able to do that successfully, he slowly starts to break. He slowly starts to wilt. He slowly starts looking for ways out, like that illegal knee that he was trying to get caught on, or that low blow that he was trying to get a DQ victory from, right? So it's very hard to back a guy like that. I was very interested to see what he looked like on the scale today, to see if there's any type of difference with his physique, if he was going to change anything about his style or anything like that. The guy looked the exact same. There's nothing different about him at all. So there's nothing that's leading me to believe that he's worth the shot. And even pre-tape, when I'm looking at this, I'm like, why the hell is Jurgen de Castro minus 300? You guys did not learn your lessons the last couple fights? Come on, guys. And then you run the tape on Danho and you're like, oh, okay. Dumpster fire number 1. Let's just pass this fight off. But ultimately, I will go with De Castro. I think you guys should decapitate me if I ever pick Danho to win a fight. But I like De Castro to win here. He could either get it done first round, or he could probably slug this through to a decision. I'm going to lead the first round and give him the benefit of the doubt that he has his back up against the wall and that he's actually going to throw and try to get Danho out of there. So I'll go first round De Castro knockout. Brady, how do you have this one?
Yeah, not sure why this is a UFC fight. It's honestly probably the most low-level fight on the card. But yeah, you can't pick Daniel. I mean, it was almost a 5-year layoff. I think the last time he fought was like 4 years, 7 months ago. And even when he fought back then, he wasn't great. So what makes you think that he's going to make massive improvements? And I really don't think so. So he's going to come in. He's going to try to get De Castro down. He probably doesn't get him down. He probably gets knocked out. Give me De Castro by first round knockout. But to lay money on this fight, you got to be slightly crazy. So give me De Castro first round knockout as well.
We definitely have some degenerates in the chat. Trust me. I know we got some degenerates in the chat, and that's what they're here for. They're here for this content, for this dumpster fire. Joe, how are you feeling about this one?
Okay, so I'm a curious person by nature, and I wonder if Danho has like photographs of like Sean Shelby being inappropriate with like farm animals or something. Because like, how does this guy not get cut? Like, I don't understand it. Here's the other thing that really drove me absolutely nuts today. He weighed at 255, right? Why was he the last guy to weigh in? Like, was he getting last licks at the buffet? Like, what is going on? Like with this guy, like you made weight by 10 pounds. Like, you're holding everybody up. Like, why didn't you weigh in first? The only thing I could think of was like he had a buffet coupon or something. Like, so I really don't know what's going on here. So yeah, look, I mean, because of the potential for a finish in a heavyweight fight, I will have shares of De Castro. I don't know on DraftKings. I don't know what his ownership is going to be. From a betting perspective, I mean, really, who knows what you're going to get, right? You'd like to back the more active guy, and obviously there's that chance of a knockout. And is this guy better than Tafa? I mean, I don't think so. So I'm going to pick De Castro to win. I'm going to have shares on DK. If I do bet him, which I haven't yet, it would have to be some type of prop, for a finish, because I'm with you. I would not lay. I, as a rule, don't like to lay those types of odds. I'm more tempted to go on the dog and take plus money. But there's a lot of things that I find curious about this fight. Like, what happened? Someone lost a bet. That's the only thing I could think of.
They got to keep Jurgen Castro active, and they have to fight out. They have to get Danho to fight out his contract. Apparently, that's probably what it is. John, how are you feeling about this one, dude?
All right, guys. The fact that I didn't bet Jarvis Danho against Jurgen de Castro at plus 250 should tell you all you need to know about Jarvis Danho. To be honest, I'd bet at minus 310. I would bet most UFC heavyweights against him. The problem is this is mixed martial arts, right? It's supposed to be several different mixed martial arts that you have. My big problem with Jurgen de Castro is, he's got a great leg kick, a legitimately great leg kick, but every fighter has some kind of game plan they want to implement on a fight-to-fight basis. But every fighter also knows there's a chance that plan A won't work. And there is, not generally a number of arts they can fall back on, whether it's boxing, Muay Thai, grappling, whatever. Yorgan De Castro, we've seen now over and over, when the leg kicks aren't there, he doesn't really have a plan B. It's really just wing wild hooks. And when someone gets in close to him, just not really do anything. Or, Locke, as you touched on, when we got to round 3 of his fight with Carlos Felipe, it was, I'm just going to hug him in the clinch and pray to God I get this decision. And so it's like, look, I agree with all of you guys about Danho. The guy is awful. Like, this should be easy work for De Castro. It's just like there's a chance he's 90%, to be honest. But it's like, I can't get past the fact of Felipe walking him down, and just because he was able to check kicks, basically win the fight by default. I talked to somebody about this earlier in the week who said they kind of think Tafa is probably minus 200 hindsight after seeing it. And I kind of agree. Like, we saw it with Hardy too. As soon as he hurt his foot, it was just like, he's like, well, okay, I'm just going to eat jabs and kicks for the next 10 minutes of this fight. So yeah, I have no interest in De Castro. I do think he's going to win. He should win. If he doesn't, he should rightfully get his pink slip out of the UFC. I guess from a DraftKings perspective, you have to assume he's going to knock him out, right, Joe? But yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't trust Yorgan De Castro.
Hey, Locke. Hey, Locke. I don't want to go off script here, but can I can I give out a Bellator parlay that'll pay 8-1 if it clicks?
Well, we're already one fight into the main card, so
has the Zingano fight started yet?
I'm not sure. I'm actually about to pull it up right now, and I will confirm that to you very shortly.
Okay. This is an 8-1. I just played this myself. It's Parker Zingano does not go the distance. Ryan Bader and Adam Borix by knockout, and that will pay 8-1. That parlay. I just bet it myself, so. I mean, I don't know. You can't see it, but there it is. There it is.
There's the proof. There's the proof.
I just bet it myself.
It looks like Zingano and Parker is just about to kick off. So
okay, so you can still get that in, guys. Get it in. 8-1. I bet it myself.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. I believe we got everybody's input on this fight. Let's move on to the next one here. We got John Mcdessey versus Ignacio Bahamundes, and I was very excited to have our guy Z on the show so that John and him could go back and forth because they've been at each other's necks all week about this fight. I know Z's probably in the chat somewhere. Z, I'm calling you up, buddy. One day you and John are going to have a bit of a debate on my show here. But Brady, I'll let you kick this one off. How are you seeing this one?
Yeah, I'm definitely not betting Bahamundes. We talked about the Contender Series guys coming in here, dropping the ball more often than not, and they always seem to get that Contender Series bump in the line here as well. So we're getting Bahamundes right around minus 190, actually opened up minus 205. So some money is coming in on the Mcdessey side. You see the weigh-ins today. Bahamundes missed weight by, I think, less than a pound, right?
0.75.
0.75. So yeah, he missed weight. He's a big dude. And for me, it's more of a fade on the Mcdessey side. I think he's coming off just about a year layoff. I think he's coming off an injury as well. 35 years old, and Bahamundes is going to have like a 7-inch height advantage or something like that, like a 7.5-inch reach advantage. And you saw the weigh-ins. He's crazy big. He's good striker, good at sticking to the outside. I don't know. I think it's going to be somewhat close. I think it could be play out closer than line indicates. I'm going to pick Bahamundes, but as far as DraftKings goes, I'm not going to touch this fight. I'm going to say Bahamundes outstrikes Mcdessey for 15 minutes, but it could be close. But I just don't want to touch a minus 190. As far as props go, I don't even want to look at the props. Plus 240 for Bahamundes by knockout. I see a decision. So give me Bahamundes in a very close decision here.
Joe, how are you seeing this one, buddy?
Yeah, so first of all, I have got to completely throw out the win against Edson Gomez on the Contender Series, and I will tell you why. I need you guys to go to Edson Gomez's Tapology page. I cannot give any credit for a win against a fighter who fucking wears cargo shorts. So that is totally discounted, that win. It's done. It's over, right? No, that doesn't count. Missed weight has as a slight height disadvantage against Mcdessey, who's coming off a pretty severe injury. Look, I think skill-wise, Mcdessey could stand with this guy. And he's kind of intriguing at his DraftKings price, but I don't have a lot of love for this fight in general. It's getting harder and harder to fade fights because we lost 2 fights. With a 15-fight card, I could certainly be under ownership on this fight. And if it goes to a boring, slow stand-up decision. And, he's not a grappler, so he's not going to try to take him down, Mcdessey. So I could see this being a really low-scoring type of fight on DraftKings, ending in a decision. So I don't have a lot of love for it, but I guess I'll take the favorite for all those intangibles that Brady mentioned. John,
we know who you're on. Just try to sell us on it now. How are you seeing this one go down, buddy?
So I do have a lot of love for this fight. So if you told me, look, there's this guy, Ignacio Bahamundes, he's a plus 200 dog against John Mcdessey. He's massive. I think he could maybe outwork him and cause him some range issues. So I'm going to take a small bet. I'd be like, all right, that makes sense. I could get on board. If you then told me I'm laying a minus 200 favorite against John Mcdessey, who has 18 fights in the UFC, is 10-8, hasn't been outlanded at distance since 2012, and the guy's fought nobody, I'd be like, that's a little crazy. And so obviously you tape it and you look. And look, there are concerns with Mcdessey. Look, he's made a habit of he's content to win or lose a boring decision. That's kind of probably his biggest flaw. Like, he doesn't have any kind of real finishing upside unless he hits like something crazy like a head kick. But the reality is, like, if you look at his metrics, the guy has outlanded his opponent in terms of efficiency by 21% at distance over the course of his career. I mean, that's incredible. He doesn't really ever get blown out in fights. His losses are all to good competition. And to be honest, now look, this is partially a function of his style, but he should have won his fights with Alan Patrick and Yancy Medeiros. If you actually look at the MMA decisions there, dramatically in his favor. And so it's like, I look at Bahamundes and like, look, yes, he has a lot of size. He's dynamic, but his gas is questionable. He has no defense. And like, if you look at the guys he has effectively pressured, they're guys who don't really have any kind of movement ability. They'll back right up to the fence and let him throw at them. Whereas Mcdessey, we know, look, I know he's a shorter fighter, but he has a much better understanding of range than Bahamundes does. He's a much more accurate striker. He's a far better defensive striker than anybody Bahamundes has fought. And so it's like, look, I get he didn't get good against Francisco Trinaldo, but like, if we're being honest, Trinaldo has been a top 20, 25 lightweight for like almost a decade. Like that, not looking great against him isn't really that big of a deal to me. And so like, I kind of look at it as, look, could Bahamundes knock him out? Yes, he could. But it hasn't happened often in Mcdessey's career. He got wheel kicked by Venata, which is kind of like a meme. He got head kicked by Cerrone and it broke his jaw. But other than that, that's really it. And so if he doesn't knock him out, well, then what happens? Like, we know he slows. I kind of think Bahamundes' upside is a close decision. Whereas on the other side, yeah, Mcdessey's most likely path is a close decision win. But we also saw him fight Jesus Pineda, another really big guy, like a year ago or a year and a half ago. And he cruised to an easy 30-27. And like, would it really be that shocking if John Mcdessey, a guy who is a kickboxer, who is statistically one of the most efficient kickboxers in history, if he was just able to frustrate him, suppress his volume, and win a pretty comfortable decision? It wouldn't for me. And so it's like, I kind of think, the guy with 18 UFC fights who's 10-8 in the UFC and only lost the top flight competition, regardless of the size difference, should be a slight favorite here. Like, I get all of the question marks, and that's why I say slight favorite. But to me, there's really no justification for Bahamundes being a favorite, much less, minus 190, minus 200. And so, like, look, I'm happy to take the loss if he loses a close decision or gets knocked out. I'm pretty confident that this spot long-term is going to be profitable. And so I have a pretty big bet on Mcdessey. I took him for like 3 units at plus 165.
Yeah, I'm glad that we had at least one person on Mcdessey, because all week, all I've been hearing is about Bahamundes. By the way, cash that Zingano sub prop because she just tapped Olivia Parker, and cash that lock that I play on the under 2.5, baby. Let's fucking go. Nice, all right, let's get back to this fight here. Yeah, I do lean with the other guys here, though, right? But Bahamundes, it seems like he has some good skills on the feet where he's able to maintain his range. Not to the best of his abilities. There's definitely better distance strikers out there. But to me, like, since the debut of John Mcdessey way back at UFC 124, I personally haven't seen much growth or improvement from him. He still fights the same way, right? No matter if he's training at TriStar or leaving TriStar, then going back to TriStar, then going to Rufus Sport, then now I believe he's at MMA Lab. Like, there is no real progression. He's just that kicking game from the outside, and he has some good volume, don't get me wrong, but like, I feel like we need to see a little bit more from there. But there is that one fight, Bachera, I think, is the guy that beat Bahamundes last. That's the one that kind of gives you something to worry about if you're backing Bahamundes up at minus 190. I don't believe he should be this big of a favorite. I believe he should be closer to like a slight favorite, maybe minus 120 in that minus 130 range, to be honest. but I feel like he's going to be able to get his shots off from the outside. Not to mention, he did miss weight, like we said, by 0.75 pounds. And a narrative that I've kind of been hammering, especially on the final weigh-in show in the past, is like when guys miss weight between like 1 and 3 pounds, they're struggling to make that weight. But when you have like somebody coming in at 5+ pounds or 6+ pounds, they just gave up. They're like, I'd rather save myself for tomorrow, give more in the cage rather than giving more in the sauna. And I feel like Bahamundes, his cardio might come to bite him in the ass here with that failed weight cut and that botched weight cut. Now, he seemed okay on the scales, right? Like, he was kind of active. He was moving around. He didn't look as bad as Impa Kasangana, trudging around all over the stage. But there is still a little bit of a concern there. Not historically speaking, Contender Series debutants haven't really been performing the greatest, right? They come out, they have this great performance on the Contender Series. Everybody's all over them. The one that comes to mind quickest is Gloria De Paula, right? Everybody's on her and thinking that she's going to go out there and just whoop Jin Yu Fry's ass, even though Jin Yu Fry was on a 2 or 3 fight skid in the UFC at that point in time. But then they forget about the veteran. They forget about the person that's been in there for a while. And in this spot, we got John Mcdessey, who, again, it's crazy the level or the range of fighters that he's fought over his UFC career, right? You got like fucking Donna Cowboy Cerrone that he's fighting. You got all the way from his Francisco Trinaldo, all these guys, just so many different skill sets, so many different types of fighters. And he's fought the debutants before too, right? He's fought the young guns in the game and turned back some of these guys too. So I don't have much confidence about Bahamundes, but I am still going to go on his side here just because the stunt and growth that we just continuously see from John Mcdessey, which is not rounding out his game fully. John, you did have something to assert here. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing. You touched on the level, and I kind of think that's something that is consistently overlooked in this game, especially MMA. You look at the NBA or the MLB, the NFL, and generally outside of the absolute most exceptional, rookies don't really overperform. We don't expect them to either. But for whatever reason in MMA, because we see that tape of them overperforming, we expect it's going to be different here, when in reality, most guys do have to take their licks because the gaps between the UFC, like even the bottom of the barrel UFC and like regional scene is enormous. Yeah. And so, I don't know, I'm agreeing with you. It's kind of like one of the other things here is it's like, look, he may turn into a star. I don't think he will. He may, but he's never performed against this level in his career.
Yeah, it's definitely a step up for Bahamundes, and we'll definitely see if he's able to pass the test here against John Mcdessey. All right, let's keep this thing moving along. We got Scott Holtzman going up against Matthias Gamrot. Gamrot comes in, obviously, his last fight, I believe he went up against Guram Kutateladze, who came in as a very big underdog. He ends up springing the upset. I believe Guram did say that he thought he lost that fight, right off the bat. You don't often see that with fighters believing that they actually dropped a decision. Joe, how are you seeing this one? I'll let you start this one off.
Yeah, by the way, 1 leg in, 2 legs to go, buddy. Woo!
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
On my Bellator parlay. Okay, so how do you not like a guy with the nickname Hot Sauce?
Right.
I love hot sauce. My favorite hot sauce, by the way, comes from Canada. And this is a true story. This is not a joke. It's called Acid Rain. It's made with African ghost pepper, and it comes from Canada. I have to buy it like through a specialty retailer. So you got to try it. Acid Rain hot sauce coming out of Canada. Anyway, look, I think Holtzman is live in this fight. I wasn't super impressed by the favorite in his last fight. I've been kind of coming around as, using Holtzman as one of my dogs in DraftKings. I don't really have luck. I mean, this guy is supposed to be good, really good. And Holtzman is 37 years old now, coming off of a vicious KO by my man Benny. Has he recovered from that? I would like to think so. I mean, this guy's a hockey player. I mean, I'm sure he's been concussed a number of times in his career. And he's really fought some solid competition. I mean, look at who he's fought. Everybody, Josh Emmett. I mean, obviously Benny. So I'm going to say that Holtzman is live. Am I going to pick him? I can't get that knockout out of my head. I will pick him as a dog here, but it's more, I like this more as a DraftKings play. Like, I would not advocate wagering on Holtzman. I would probably not advocate wagering on this fight at all, but I do think that there's some merit in playing Holtzman on DraftKings.
John, how are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, so I like the hot sauce too, as well, Joe. But You guys think when they're talking about Scott Holtzman, you guys seeing his body, you think we're referring to the condiment or the Mexican supplements he's using?
I will say, John, in his defense, he's always been ripped. Like if you look at his last couple, I mean, and he would have popped by now. I mean, I would think.
Underrated bodies in the UFC, probably top 15 underrated bodies in the UFC. Let's be honest, guys.
Yeah, and we got Mackenzie Dern coming up. So, yeah.
That's not underrated. But
yeah, I think it is actually.
Look, this is a weird one for me because like I've generally been more bullish on Holtzman than most. Just like his style is very conducive to winning rounds, right? Like very go forward, high volume, very hard to hold on the mat. You know, he doesn't accept bottom position, gets up. Even though he gives his back, it's hard to take his back because he fights hands and uses the fence very well to break back control. And so he's kind of, you know, he's really like, he's obviously not top 15, but I'd call him like a pretty good measuring stick for like your top 25, 20. I actually bet him against Benny and that was brutal. That was absolutely brutal. But, you know, it's weird because on the one hand, like, you know, I think Gamrot's skills are pretty serious. Like I think his future is very, very high, but I also think this is a kind of matchup where it's like, look, Gamrot doesn't have a ton of power in his hands. He couldn't control Kutateladze on the mat, and so I don't think he can control Scott. You know, I think he'll get takedowns, maybe even 4 or 5, and that might be enough to win on optics. I even think he's probably the better range striker, but you're dealing with somebody like Holtzman zombie pressure who hits very hard. He's going to keep that pace for 15 minutes. And like I said, it's a tough measuring stick here. Like I haven't bet Holtzman just because, look, that KO was brutal. He is 36. I know he doesn't have a ton of mileage, and I do like Gamrot's talent. If it crosses that like plus 230 mark, though, where it's like now all of a sudden we're getting to less than 30% implied, I think I'm going to take a stab. It's a big step up for Gamrot, even from Kutateladze, in my opinion. And even if Gamrot is the better fighter, you know, it's not easy the first time you deal with a guy who can effectively pressure and is going to throw all fight. So I kind of think unless he's hurting Holtzman, and I don't think he's going to be, minutes are going to be pretty close. And like, you know, he'll land takedowns, but I don't think he's going to control them. So I think it's a relatively close fight. I favor Gamrot because I think he's far more skilled, but you know, my lean's Holtzman. I guess my pick's going to be Gamrot, but like I said, if it goes over plus 230, I'm going to probably stab Scott.
I get what you're saying in terms of the odds being a little bit too wide, and I do agree because he doesn't leave a lot to be desired in his last fight, right? Which is why I went so close to that split decision, I believe it was. However, with that said, like I feel like he comes into this fight with a little bit more sauce on those shots, no pun intended. Like I feel like he's going to go out there and try to put together a little bit more shots, more combinations, you know, up the ante a little bit. I'm sure he goes back and watches that fight against Griffin and be like, fuck, you know, I fought a little bit too close in that fight. I'm taking, you know, more than likely a step up in competition here. The jury is still out on how good Guram actually is. He could possibly turn out to be a solid fighter himself, but you know, just pre-fight here, we got to believe that this is a step up in competition for Gamrot, and it was his first ever loss last time around, right? Like that's the first time he ever tasted defeat, and that's not the way he wanted to be introduced to the American audience, especially with being such a big star over there in KSW. But from a stylistic standpoint, I just love the way he mixes his full game together. His striking and his combinations are really good, and his ability to mix in takedowns behind those combinations is very good as well. That's something that was very you know, kind of shined to me when I was watching his tape on KSW. But Holtzman is a gamer, man. Like, again, that's freaking Gamrot's nickname, which is hilarious. But he is definitely a gamer. The guy goes out there and goes out on his shield if that's what it ends up having to be, just like it was in that Benny Dariush fight. And don't worry, John, I got starched by Benny Dariush last time around with CDF, so I definitely know how it feels to bet against Benny Dariush. But in terms of Gamrot here, I think he's just going to have Holtzman covered pretty much everywhere. I think Holtzman, you know, 37 years old is obviously up there, but when you're talking about fight time, he doesn't really have that much experience under his belt. He's been in the UFC since 2015, which is a little bit crazy to me. I don't know why I thought he came in like 2017 or 2018, but I feel like this style is going to be a little bit hard for him to kind of solve. You know, Holtzman isn't great at one thing. He's pretty much good as an MMA fighter, but Gamrot is just good at everything as an MMA fighter. But I think just a step above, 2 steps above what we're going to see from Holtzman. So yeah, it could play out close, but I think at the end of the day, we're going to see Gamrot up the volume a little bit. And it's hard to just predict that though, right? We got to see him actually do it inside the cage. And I'm hoping that's what we get to see. Minus 240 though, that's a little bit dicey. You know, that is definitely chalky. So if you want to put the handicapper hat on here, it's, you know, you can't really justify playing him at that mark. Personally, I don't mind him as a parlay piece, but I wouldn't put him in anything like, you know, wouldn't wager anything more than 2 or 3 units on this guy, given how close the potential of this fight could be. So I'll go with Gamrot myself. And I do like Gamrot to win this fight, possibly by decision. Brady, did we get to you for this fight already?
No, you didn't.
All right, let's get you into it.
All right, yeah. So I kind of thought about maybe having Gamrot as a parlay piece, but I'm with you guys. I think it could play out fairly close. Gamrot, not the most volume, but I really do like the skill set. I think he's extremely well-rounded. And Holtzman, 37 years old. I think he's about to turn 38 pretty soon here. And we just saw him get knocked out. How's that knockout going to affect him? But typically a very, very durable guy. I'm going to take Gamrot to be the better striker, to mix in the takedowns. And like John said, Holtzman's very hard to hold down, and I don't think Gamrot's going to hold him down or nothing like that, but I do think he can rack up multiple takedowns and win a close decision. Am I going to lay the minus 240? Probably not. If I was to bet on this fight, it probably would be Gamrot by decision at plus 105. Gamrot, not typically a finisher with like a 50% finish rate, and Scott Holtzman's only knockout loss was in his last fight against Beneil Dariush. So if I was to bet something, it would be that decision prop, but I think the smart move on this one's probably to sit back and watch it.
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm glad that you brought up the decision prop there. Plus 105 is not a bad line, considering that's probably his most likely path to victory here against a quite durable Scott Holtzman. Let's throw that Beneil Dariush fight out, because Beneil Dariush can just, you know, Astro card close. I'm not sure if he's woken up from that fight. So, but yeah, Beneil Dariush definitely has some sauce on his shots. All right, John, we'll kick you off on this next one. The next one that we got up is actually the prelim headliner. We got Jim Miller going in there and hopefully giving a veteran lesson here to Joe Solecki. Do you think he's successful in doing so? How do you see this one happening?
Oh, Jim Miller's my boy. He's about 40 minutes west of Joe and I.
New Jersey, baby.
Yeah, New Jersey. Yeah, it's kind of a weird fight because, like, I've been more bullish on Solecki than most. I actually maxed him against Hubbard last fight. You know, I think he's got some real nice tools. You know, his jiu-jitsu is serious. I guess my concern here with Solecki is I think Solecki's got a legit minus 350, 400 path to victory if he just goes and grapples him. Because the reality is I'm not, and I do have some concerns with Solecki going forward about his wrestling. I'm not sure that it's bad, but I'm not sure that it's good because he hasn't really been forced to, you know, go against anybody who's going to provide much resistance yet. But I don't think Miller will be the guy to provide resistance. So I guess my view on this fight is if Solecki is like, okay, I'm going to be fine on top and I'm going to mess him up, he's going to be able to get takedowns and, like, you know, he could get guillotined, I suppose, but I'm moderately confident that that won't happen. And I'm very confident that once he's in top position, his jiu-jitsu is such and his top game is such that he's not going to get subbed from bottom. With that said, my concern here, and the reason I didn't bet it is, you know, we see this play out time and again where guys get afraid of their opponent's guard, guys with famous guard, with good guard games. And it's like, I don't think Solecki should be afraid of Miller's guard. But if he is, and he decides he wants to slug it out with him or test his striking, I think things could get dicey because I do think Miller's still a fairly potent striker while he's fresh. Do I think he'll knock him out? Probably not, but he could lose minutes on the feet to Miller. Now, with that said, I do think, you know, if Miller wins round one, like the Pichel fight where I bet Pichel and I was screaming at the TV when he wasn't attempting takedowns in round one, I do think if he gets pieced up for a round, he's going to start going for takedowns. But, you know, it's just a concern of mine because it's like how many times do I have to watch this? Like I bet on Verna against Dern. I'm like, you know, elite jiu-jitsu practitioner. She shouldn't be afraid of Dern's guard. Terrified of Dern's guard and strikes with her. Yeah. I'm just a little nervous something like that happens and it turns into, you know, a slow-paced kickboxing match where he can't exploit Miller's gas tank. But, you know, that said, like I said, I think if he does what he always does and goes for takedowns, I think he's going to get the takedowns. I think he can hold him down on top, and I'm very confident he's not getting sub from guard. So my pick, Solecki. I think there might be value on the line, to be honest. I'm a little concerned with how the fight's going to play out.
Yeah, I do like me some Solecki here. Now, when we have matchups like this where we have a guy with a really good guard and another guy with solid jiu-jitsu himself, normally it actually does remind me of the last fight that we had in Bellator between Khalid Murtazaliev and Fabio Aguirre, where you're like, let's just tire him out on the feet for the first round, and then let's go for the takedowns where he's not as dangerous with his guard, and you don't have to really worry about jiu-jitsu or any submissions coming back your way. man, that fight was a little bit too much of a sweat when you're laying minus 275 on Mcdessey, even though I'm sure most of you guys got like minus 160, minus 180 earlier in the week. But here I feel comfortable with Solecki going for the takedown here nice and early, right? I think him having that 10-year youth advantage, him having the strength and size and speed advantage in this fight is going to be huge for him. I think he will absolutely go out there and, I don't want to say mop the floor with Jim Miller on the ground, but like he should be able to be a step ahead pretty much at all times when they are on the ground. I think his wrestling is definitely improving, but does it really need to improve that much when you have a guy like Jim Miller who has piss poor takedown defense? No, right? I think Joe Solecki will be very successful in dragging this fight to the ground, and I think that's something that he'll look to do nice and early here. It did scare me a little bit when he was one of the later ones to come in at the weigh-ins today, where I'm like, ooh, I hope he's not having a bad weight cut, because like by all accounts, it seemed like he was in great shape all week. But you know, fighters normally put on a pretty good poker face on the IG, and then once it comes to weigh-ins, they're like, oops, I missed weight by 3.5 pounds. But not for a guy Joe Solecki. He looked great, you know, full of energy coming out to the stage, coming out to the scale. He looked in amazing shape. I think he's ready to go here, and I think he knows what's at stake, right? You're going up against a UFC legend here, a guy I believe Jim Miller is tied, or at least has the most UFC fights in UFC history, which is absolutely insane. And you got a guy like Joe Solecki who was trying to make a name off of himself. Now he has 2 fights in the UFC. Obviously, the Matt Wyman fight goes to a decision there, and I think he lost a lot of love for people in that fight because he wasn't able to finish Matt Wyman. But can you really blame the guy? Matt Wyman's never been submitted in his career. Still hasn't been submitted in his career. Yeah, he's been knocked out a couple times, but never been submitted. So he has definitely a good submission defense game about him. And then he goes into the Austin Hubbard fight as a plus 100 dog because people are just not respecting him anymore. And then he reminds you guys real quick, oh, Austin Hubbard, you're going to give me your back? Let me just hop on it real quick and just sink in this choke. And that's exactly what we saw from him that night. His jiu-jitsu game is top level. I think he's one of the best jiu-jitsu players in the UFC at this point in time, given the fact that he's 27 years old, still making improvements. And the one thing that I like about his game is that he is making improvements in his striking game. That, like, if you go through his fights chronologically, you'll see an improvement in terms of the power that he throws with, the confidence that he throws with, and the combinations that he's starting to throw with too. However, I don't think he's going to want to play too much here with Jim Miller, who still has some power in his hands. That guy can just watch the Clay Guida fight, right? He gets rocked early, he rocks Clay Guida, then sinks in a guillotine choke. Like, he definitely still has power in his hands. Now, the Roosevelt Roberts fight, right? Everybody's like, oh, we got Jim Miller 7.0 now. You know, he's submitting Roosevelt Roberts, but Roosevelt Roberts slips. He ends up on his back. You got Jim Miller on top of you, you're fucked. But when you're Joe Solecki and you have a really good guard and you have a really good jiu-jitsu game, even if that happens to you, the same situation, he's really much covered and he's really much safe in terms of not getting submitted here by Jim Miller. I'd be very surprised if he gets submitted by Jim Miller. And the last thing I'll say about this fight, a lot of people are a little bit concerned with how Joe Solecki was completing the takedowns against Matt Wyman, putting his neck in there to potentially get guillotine. You got to believe he's been working on the submission defense here. He knew he could probably get away with it against Matt Wyman. There's no way he knows he has to protect his neck for sure here against Jim Miller, and I'd be surprised if we see him actually jump into a guillotine here by Jim Miller. So I love Joe Solecki in the spot. Like John said, he's probably going to end up looking like a minus 300, minus 350 come fight time. I like him at the line that he's at. I'm definitely very bullish on Joe Solecki. I think this is a great stylistic matchup for him. So I'm going to take him to win this fight. And this is another potential for a round 3 prop. Jim Miller does start to slow down. We're going to see the grappling start to wear on him, the strength of Joe Solecki start to wear on him. So give me that round 3 prop on Joe Solecki as well. But Jim Miller is quite durable. I'll give him that. I am more bullish on the decision prop here for Joe Solecki. But with how high the round 3 prop normally is, I don't mind a little bit of a sprinkle on there in case Jim Miller does start huffing and puffing a little bit too much in that 3rd round. Brady, how are you seeing this one go down?
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Solecki here quite a bit, and I'm fairly comfortable with him, and I do have him in a parlay. It's just he's 10 years younger. His striking, like you mentioned, it's coming along. It's looking better and better each fight. I think we're going to get the best version of Joe Solecki we've ever seen, and last fight, he looked fantastic. And that was funny you mentioned that. A lot of people were picking Hubbard because of the fact that Solecki didn't sub Matt Wyman, and he went out there and subbed him in the first. That was awesome. But yeah, I do like Solecki. I like his game a lot. Legit BJJ black belt. The guy's grappling is phenomenal. I would be honestly really shocked if Jim Miller did submit him. And if he did, it would probably be in that 1st round. And that's kind of what we got to worry about, especially with Jim Miller nowadays. It's that 1st round. If Solecki can survive that 1st round, I think he can definitely take over. Jim Miller has about a round of gas. The takedowns will start to come. Jim Miller, 46% takedown defense. I like Solecki. I'm fairly confident in it. And I don't have many plays on this card just because it's kind of like a sketchy card where it seems like there's a lot of traps. I think Joe Solecki is one of more safer plays. So give me Joe Solecki. I'm going to take him to win by decision. But like you mentioned, I think there is possible upside for that 3rd round.
You guys know I love me some round 3 props. So if I spot any little hindrance of it, I'll definitely let you guys know. Joe, I saw you shaking your head when I posed a question to John regarding whether Jim Miller is going to be giving our guy Joe Solecki a veteran lesson here. It seems like you're bullish on Joe Solecki. Let us know how you feel about it.
I am. Again, I'm gonna be boring and complete the superfecta here. By the way, Vince from Hell Pichel was actually older than Jim Miller when he got the win. So. And again, he's lost to older fight. He lost to Trinaldo when Trinaldo's 42 now, and Miller lost to Trinaldo. But yeah, Miller's a New Jersey guy. I respect what he's done. Him and his brother running a gym in New Jersey. Let's not feel too sorry for Jim Miller. His deal with the UFC, and this is public. I'm not divulging any top secret information here. He gets $104,000 in show money and $104,000 if he wins. So he's getting a 6-figure paycheck just for simply stepping in the octagon. That's his current deal with the UFC. I mean, he's made well over 7 figures in his career in fighting. And again, I know you got expenses, and that's not, maybe it's maybe not what you think it is, but still, he's getting 6 figures for stepping in there. I like Solecki. I thought he looked okay, coming off the scales. Maybe that last pound was a little hard, but he seemed to be okay. He at least is fighting later in the card, so that gives him a couple of extra hours here. Not that I think he's going to need it. I like him here. 2 DraftKings performances, 200-point performances. I think he's going to be fairly popular. Look, there's risk, which is why Miller is worth a small shot in ownership here. If Miller kind of sinks in the sub, or if he catches him with something early, you should have some shares of Miller. But I like Solecki, and I think he's going to be fairly popular.
Yeah, shout out to my guy JB in the chat here saying, you'd better believe Jim Miller has earned that paycheck if he's probably up there for the most UFC fights in UFC history. So yeah, give that man his 6 figures, even if he doesn't win the fight. All right, I'm glad that we completed the superfecta there, like my guy Joe said. And that pretty much completes the prelims for us. I do want to remind you guys, we have over 150 people in the chat here. If you guys haven't already, please do hit that like. Please do hit that subscribe. I appreciate the support. Again, that odds show is no longer around, so I'm trying to fill the void of this 9 p.m. Friday night. And I think we're succeeding. I think we got a good group of guys here. Seems like people in the live chat are having some fun. So I'm very happy to bring this show to you guys. All right, let's move on to the next fight, and I'll kick this one off. We got Mike Perry going up against, or should I say Papa Perry, going up against Daniel Rodriguez. I'm very much looking forward to this fight. This is one of the 2 parents or first-time parents on this card, and I think we're probably going to see that narrative actually come true here for Mike Perry. The last 2 fights leave a lot to be desired, right? He goes 1-1 against Mickey Gall and Tim Means. The Mickey Gall fight was an interesting one because at the beginning, it looks like Mickey Gall is having some fun on the feet. He's actually piecing up Mike Perry, having some good connections and actually landing some good shots. And then Mike Perry's like, fuck this. Let's take this fight to the ground and let me just grind this fight out. It's interesting because he actually scored close to 91 points on DraftKings just from almost grappling and control time. That's not what you're expecting from Mike Perry at that point. But it was a good way for him to adjust on the fly and get that victory. Then Tim Means was just a little bit too high of a mountain for him to climb, right? Tim Means just has such a great long jab, great striking game. If he's able to stay conscious for 15 minutes, he's more than likely going to piece you up from distance, and that's exactly what he did against Mike Perry. The funny thing in that fight too, Mike Perry starts that fight off by taking Tim Means down, and it was very surprising to see him to take that approach. I thought he was going to try to find that chin right off the bat, but he just didn't take that approach. That was the fight where he had a fan in his corner, right? I believe he auctioned off a spot in his corner because he just didn't give a fuck about having any coaches there. But now he's actually aligned himself with MMA Masters. And now I'm not 100% sure if he's actually going to have those coaches in his corner. I believe that there's news that he's not going to. But the fact that he actually went out to MMA Masters and started training with these guys, started training with the proper gym, a proper head coach, somebody that can actually devise a proper game plan for him, you got to think he's coming in with a little extra zest on his game plan and his style. Not to mention, you got to feed it out of the mouth. Now you want to go out there and make sure you make weight. Not to mention, he looked amazing on the scales to me. I thought he looked probably one of the best he's ever looked at in recent memory. And you want to make sure you get your full purse, and then you want to go out there and secure that win bonus too. Now, stylistically, Daniel Rodriguez, almost similar to Tim Means with the striking style, right? He's very long, very rangy, has a very nice jab from the southpaw position where he's able to keep opponents on the end of his jab, just like he did in that Gabe Green fight. But that Nicholas Dalby fight really gave him some issues where Dalby came in with this like weird karate stance, just staying fully on the outside and then just blitzing forward, landing a couple shots, and then clinching up with them every now and then, and just winning seconds and minutes of that fight to eventually get that judge's decision. I just feel like we're going to see a different type of Mike Perry. And this is one thing that I've been hammering home pretty much all week. MMA Masters, something that they're actually known for is the calf kick, right? You got guys like Miguel Baez, or you got Danny Chavez. I know Colby Covington's over there right now, but I'm not sure if he's really been implementing it into his game. But that's something that they're trying to hammer into their fighters. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Mike Perry actually put that into his game, especially having to deal with the reach disadvantage that he's going to have here. So hopefully he can do that, implement that, start to immobilize the movement of Daniel Rodriguez so that he can get into the pocket and get his big shots off. I still think that we see Mike Perry land the more devastating blows. Daniel Rodriguez is slightly chinny. If you guys remember that Dwight Grant fight, back and forth, crazy fight where they're rocking, hurting each other. Dwight Grant, you probably could have stopped that fight, and Dwight Grant probably could have got his hand raised. And I feel like Mike Perry does have maybe a little bit more power than Dwight Grant, even though we haven't seen him knock anybody out since 2017 against Alex Reyes. But his level of competition has only been getting better since that amount of time. But here against Daniel Rodriguez, I just feel like Daniel Rodriguez is just a little bit too overrated. His price tag is always a little bit too much, and people just automatically jump on his train ever since he knocked out Tim Means as, I believe, like a plus 250 underdog, right? He came into that fight as a very, very hefty underdog, and now he's all out of the sudden this amazing fighter. I'm a fan of Daniel Rodriguez, don't get me wrong, but I think he's going to be a little bit out-gridded and out-toughed in this fight by Mike Perry, who's a little bit more willing to exchange in the pocket, and I think that's where he's going to have most of his success. So I'm taking Mike Perry. KO is possible. I definitely see that as a possibility, but I think ultimately he's going to go out there and get a decision victory. So I'm taking Mike Perry as a slight dog. I think he's one of the more liver dogs on this card. So I'll go Mike Perry. Brady, how are you seeing this one?
Man, I definitely get every single one of your points. I understand the narratives of, he's looking fantastic. Saw on Instagram, he looked fantastic at the weigh-ins. It definitely backed it up. Although he was on Instagram posting a video of him eating a burger, which kind of gets me a little bit, but he looked good at the weigh-ins. I get that. I get the dad narrative. I get the camp change. Everything is pointing towards, Mike Perry is very live. And I do think he's live, but it's just hard to trust the guy. It's hard to put money on the guy at this point. I mean, in his last 3 fights, really, especially, in his last fight against Means was just picking him apart. He outlanded him 128-64 in the Mickey Gall fight. He was getting outstruck at points against Mickey Gall, the grappler, and was taking him down. I think he's live. I think he's live to win. I can't put my money on Mike Perry. I don't know where his head's at. The guy is a little bit of a nutcase. So I'm actually going to go on the other side with D-Rod. I think D-Rod's going to pick him apart. Mike Perry's extremely tough, only been knocked out once. D-Rod tough himself, never been knocked out. I do think this goes to decision. I do think it's fairly close, but the volume of D-Rod and how hittable Mike Perry is, especially as of late, I'm going to take D-Rod to win a 3-round decision. But I definitely get all the narratives, and there probably is or was value on Mike Perry at plus 150, but I just can't put the money on myself. So I'm going to go with D-Rod. I'm going to take him to win by decision. But as far as DraftKings goes, Mike Perry on DraftKings, 70 for 100. That's where I'm going to be. But as far as a pick goes, I'm going to take D-Rod.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely in agreement with you in terms of let's go see what Papa Perry looks like first before we're actually going out there and putting serious money on him. But I'm riding with their narrative a little bit too hard, it seems. Joe, how are you seeing this one?
Gotta love Mike Perry. I mean, anytime Mike Perry moves to a new town, the collective IQ of the town he leaves goes down. He heard his significant other was pregnant and with triplets, and he went all over town looking for the other 2 guys. I mean, like they asked him in English class what comes at the end of a sentence, and he said the appeal. I mean, this is Mike Perry, right? I want Kevin Holland, win, lose, or draw in the main event. I want him to drop to 170 and fight Mike Perry. What a cool fight that would fucking be. I think that, the run of Daniel Rodriguez is coming to an end. Look, he made Gabe Green look good. Gabe Green took that fight on short notice, survived the 3 rounds. As it turned out, that fight was stackable. Not often do you see the first fight of a night in DraftKings stackable, but they had a sick combined score with all the significant strikes landed. Perry, the competition level is night and day who Mike Perry has fought in. And Brady made a great point, 7.4K on DraftKings. The last test was just looking to see how he weighed in, and he weighed in. He looked good. Fight IQ, you just don't know what you're going to get out of him, but it seems like he made some positive changes, and I kind of like him here. I'm going to pick him to upset. All
right. John, how do you see this one go down?
Yeah, so I do like Mike Perry here. So look, I don't put a lot of in gyms generally. I kind of think the difference most major gyms make is marginal. What I will say is this: you ever play basketball with your boys out? You guys just get together on a Saturday, play ball. If someone's watching on the outside, it's a gross shit show. People, it's just constant isolation. Nothing's designed, anything. If you go look at 14-year-olds playing rec basketball, it's more coherent than a bunch of 30-year-olds playing basketball themselves. Why? Because there is coaching. It's not a massive difference, but it's a difference. And look, he looked horrible his last 2 fights, but the guy was running his own camp and nothing happened. Now he had a full camp. No, we won't have a coach in his corner, but he will have a fighter from there. He had an actual camp at an actual gym. Again, I don't think gyms make a massive difference in the grand scheme of things, but I do think having real structure that goes into a real fight camp and having Mike Perry running his own camp, the difference there is probably somewhat substantial. So look, I can't dispute he looked bad in those fights, but let's be real here. Look, I've always been a big stats guy. Team stats matter. That's my whole thing. But one of the things I used to do was just take stats in their totality and just look, what do the stats mean? Who's going to win? Doesn't really work like that. So we talked about levels of competition earlier in the show. Well, let's look here. D-Rod's got great stats, and on paper, he's statistically the better fighter. No question about it. But, he's put up those stats. Look, Gabe Green landed 120 significant strikes against him. You look in hindsight, no row, and that looks not nearly as good as it did then. You could say, Means pieced up Mike Perry, but, D-Rod killed Tim Means. Well, look at the first round of the Tim Means D-Rod fight, if we're being honest. Means was piecing him up. He gets rocked at the horn. He's clearly concussed coming out for round 2. That fight, does anybody really think Daniel Rodriguez is going to win that fight if Means doesn't get rocked at the horn there? I don't think so personally. And then you look, he gets rocked by Dwight Grant. He doesn't have great defense in the pocket. And then, we talked about his volume, which is really his big edge in this fight, right? He goes out and fights Nick Dalby. Now, I would take Mike Perry against Nick Dalby at evens without blinking. I think most of us would. And suddenly he has a low-volume fight that he loses. Now, I personally thought he won, but Daniel Rodriguez in his 8 significant strikes a minute lands 55 significant strikes across 50 minutes against Nick Dalby. That's pretty concerning, especially because Perry's a better striker than Nick Dalby. Now, again, I'm not trying to MMA math it here, but let's look at Mike Perry's career. He won a kickboxing match with Danny Roberts. Danny Roberts, he's got his flaws, but he's a pretty good striker. He won a kickboxing match with Paul Felder. He won a fight with Alex Oliveira. He had competitive striking fights with Vicente Luque in a fight he arguably won, and a competitive striking fight with Santiago Ponzinibbio. Look, I know he's looked bad his last 2 fights, but D-Rod's 34 years old. Mike Perry's 29. There's still room to improve. We know he had a real camp. The guy hits hard. He's shown good boxing in the past. And so it's you're telling me, look, D-Rod just going to go out strike him? I mean, maybe he could. Look, Perry did look bad his last 2 fights. But the reality is Mike Perry's had 14 fights in the UFC, and he has fought some top competition, and he's won some of those fights. I know he's lost 3 out of 4, but look at the guys that have beaten him. I don't think Daniel Rodriguez has beaten Jeff Neal. I don't think he's beating Vicente Luque, right? So it's I can't take it that seriously. And so ultimately I look at it, yes, the volume is a concern. I do think D-Rod could jab him and win that fight. But, we see D-Rod's happy to brawl if you get in the pocket. I don't think outside of his jab, the rest of his boxing combinations are that clean, and he's very defensively susceptible. If Perry can walk him down, there are going to be openings to hit him. I'm pretty confident that Perry's more durable. He probably has a takedown upside. Look, I know D-Rod's a black belt, but I think Perry's grappling is pretty good. I'd be pretty surprised if he got guard subbed here. I just ultimately look, I think the volume and, how their form has looked of late is enough to say, okay, it's an evens fight, but, Perry's got the better level of competition. He's a more proven fighter. He's got more power, and he's got more durability. I don't see how this can be past evens. So I took a unit shot at him at plus 159 here.
I like it. That's a very good breakdown here of Mike Perry, who again is very live on this card, and you completely understand why the line is starting to close as much as it is, because people are starting to see that. And again, I'm totally on the bandwagon of, and I've been calling it for the last couple of fights now, is that Daniel Rodriguez is a little bit overhyped. There's no way that I was going to lay the chalk on him against Nicholas Dalby last time around, because everybody expected him to go out there and knock him out relatively quickly. And I want to give a quick shout out to our guy AJ's MMA Betting, who put out an article recently talking about we put too much stock into standing KOs, and that's exactly a perfect example of it, where the KO doesn't transpire. What happens for the rest of the fight? You're kind of screwing yourself almost, right? All right, let's move on to the next fight. We got the debut of Nina Nunes going up against Mackenzie Dern here. I'm very excited for this fight. Brady, I'll let you kick things off, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to call her Nina Ansaroff just in case I mess it up, but I'm going to go with Nina Ansaroff here. This is honestly one of my more confident picks on the slate. I know she's only like minus 135. I did get her at minus 110. I probably would bet her at minus 135, minus 150, etc. here. I think it's a great matchup for her. Yeah, just her takedown defense. I know she had a baby and all that good stuff, but her takedown defense in the past has been very, very good. Sitting like close to 80%, and she's fought some very good wrestlers. Suarez, very good wrestler. I think she was like 4 for 13. I think Marcos was like 1 for 11. Gadelia was like 2 for 10. So she's very good at stuffing takedowns, very strong, has a very good sprawl. And Dern, I'm sure everybody's heard it all week. She has a 5% takedown accuracy. So I really don't think Dern gets his fight down to the mat. And at that point, I think they're going to be striking for 15 minutes. And yes, Dern's striking did look a little bit improved against Gina Danarova, but that was against Jandiroba, somebody that's strictly a grappler, not a striker at all. So I like Anzarov here. I feel like the striking exchanges could play out somewhat close just with the style of Mackenzie Dern coming forward, landing bombs and all that. But I'm going to go with the more technical striker, Anzarov, to pick her apart for 15 minutes. And just kind of going through the record of Dern, I mean, she's had it quite easy. I mean, in some of her fights, the fight IQ of these fighters like Hannah Cyphers, she was on top. Instead of standing up, she went right back into the guard of Dern. For some reason, she got subbed. And then Miranda Marcos, who said in an interview prior to that fight she wasn't going to go to the ground with Dern, she went to the ground with Dern. She got subbed. I mean, Anzarov has to know, like, to win this fight, don't go to the mat with Dern. So if I think it's going to be standing for 15 minutes, I got to go with Anzarov. Yes, the baby and all that, the layoff, but she looked fantastic at the weigh-in. She looked fantastic on Instagram. When they faced off, she's a little bit bigger as well. So I'm going to take Anzarov to win. And if Dern outstrikes her for 15 minutes, I'll gladly take my L, but I do have a bet on Nina Anzarov minus 110.
So Brady's fading the new parent in the last matchup, taking the new parent in this matchup. Joe, are you going double parent parlay? What's up? What do you like here?
Well, you know, there's one thing I learned. I always try to teach myself something with each slate as it relates to how I look at fights. And the one thing I realized here is that you can't really get a lot of study done when you're just looking at still photographs of a fighter. You know, like, so I unfortunately never actually got to the tape. I kind of got stuck on just still photos of Mackenzie Dern, and my God, if she didn't get hotter after she had her kid. But yeah, AJ said it best. I mean, you know, I like some of the improvements that Dern has been making. I mean, you know, training, striking. I am a little concerned about the layoff with Nina Nunes. You know, she's going to have Amanda in her corner. She's going to have Mike Brown in her corner. Great training partners in American Top Team. What was really interesting is I heard that an early line, a book, opened this fight at plus 240 on Anzarov, on Nunes. Can you imagine someone getting a taste of that at plus 240? I don't know where the line is now that I would actually bet it if I hadn't already put a bet on Anzarov. I mean, I'm going to have both sides on DraftKings because, again, I think Dern has been making improvements. She's been a lot more active, obviously. You know, I'm going to pick Anzarov for the win, but I can't fault anyone who wants to go on Dern, especially on DraftKings at 7.9K. I think there's certainly some merit to having some shares of Dern. I'm less interested in Anzarov at 8.3K because I don't think she's going to land the same volume of strikes that she landed on, say, Angela Hill, where she put up a massive number. I was actually at that fight in Richmond, Virginia. So I think it could be a fairly low-scoring fight. You know, if Nunes wins. But I think if Dern wins, she's probably going to win by submission, which is why I think, you know, it's worth having some shares of Dern on DraftKings.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a close fight, but it seems like the public perception seems to be on the Nina Nunes side here. John, are you in the same camp here? Are you like Nunes?
Yeah, I am. I hate a little bit how many people are on her. It makes me a little uncomfortable. It makes me think I'm missing something. But yeah, so I have 2 units on her minus 110, 1 unit on her minus 105. So there's like 3 things I generally, and now look, let's get it out of the way at the beginning. Look, she had a baby. She's coming off a layoff. That's a concern. We all know that. I'd probably be heavier on her if that wasn't the case. Yeah, there's a chance she could atrophy. But there's 3 things I generally look for when I'm breaking down a fight and trying to cap it. It's what does the tape look like? Number 1. Number 2, what do the stats look like? Number 3, what's the level edge look like here? And in all 3 of those things, I see a substantial advantages for Nina here. And it's like, I can't, it doesn't matter how many people are betting on Dern. It's like, I see that. And like, yeah, or betting on Nina, I should say. I don't love how many people are on her, but like, I can't escape those things. And so it's like, look, okay, yeah, Dern is 5% takedown defense offense. Could she have improved that? Yes, it's reasonable to suspect she could be making improvements. But like, let's look at Nina. Tatiana Suarez lands 60% of her takedowns in the UFC, went 4 for 13 against Nina. Claudia lands 40%, went 2 for 10. Can you reasonably project Dern to land more than one takedown? I don't think you can. And let's say she lands one. Is she going to land one in open space? I personally don't think that's particularly likely. I think if she does, it's most likely coming against the fence. And we've seen Nina's get-ups on the fence are quite good. And so I don't really think there's any real reason to think, unless Dern really improved wrestling and lands a takedown in open space, she's going to hold her down. Yeah, she could meme a sub out and scramble. That's possible. But other than that, then let's look at the feet. People keep talking about Dern's improvements, but watching the Verna fight, yeah, she tightened her jab up a bit. But other than that, I don't see a whole lot of other improvements. Yes, she goes forward, but she doesn't return fire when she gets hit. It's not like she's improved herself on the counter. She's still not very accurate. She slows down pretty dramatically after a round. And, against Verna, she could just kind of bull rush forward into the clinch because Verna's not a striker and doesn't really know what to do, so she backs up. Nina is going to move the entire fight. We saw it against Claudia. After the first round when she started to slow, Claudia tried to pressure her, but she couldn't. She just kept getting jabbed over and over again. Now, small cage, maybe it helps Dern there, but ultimately I can't get past it. Nina's got much better stats at distance. She's outlanding her opponents by 3 strikes per minute, whereas Dern is getting outlanded at distance. And the difference in skill level between the opponents they face is fairly substantial. It's reasonable to project Nina to do better here and Dern to do worse than them to even continue at, the same rates they've been at. You look at the tape. Projecting Dern for more than a takedown seems crazy. I can't get past that. So it's like ultimately then where does Dern win this fight? I guess she could get some clinch control and win there. Maybe lands a hard shot and hurts her. That's possible. But like even with all that factored in, yeah, and Nina's finishing upsides low, which I don't love. It's like, what percentage can I really assign to Dern if her best path to victory is likely a victory based on a couple shots in WMMA that hurt her in cage control? What percentage can I really assign her? And I can't get past like 35% here. And so I think Nina should be about minus 185, like 65%. She's got every edge that I look for. The layoff's a concern, but yeah, I'm on Nina and I'm pretty confident in it.
Yeah, I'm gonna complete it here. And I do like some Nina as well. The one thing that I don't think none of you guys actually brought up was actually that Claudia Gadelha fight where she did get taken down pretty early in that first round, and she made a good account of herself, right? Gadelha is a pretty solid jiu-jitsu player herself, obviously not to the level of Mackenzie Dern, but who really is on that type of level. But, second, third best, you got to start circling Claudia Gadelha with one of the better jiu-jitsu games in that division. So she did a good job of, submission defense, not really getting into too much trouble. And then, the historic fact about Claudia Gadelha, though, is her poor gas tank, and that's where Nina Ansaroff was really able to start getting her game going, start eating her up with that jab from the outside, and then running away with the decision victory late in that fight. That was one of the fights at the time that I didn't dig deep enough into, and I was actually live at that fight because it was in Toronto, I believe, at UFC 239. And when that one went, my Hail Mary parlay just went to shit because I'm just like, how the hell is Nina Ansaroff beating Claudia Gadelha? That one definitely stunned me, but she had a great game plan, and the historic poor gas tank of Claudia Gadelha showed itself once again. But yeah, you guys hit the nail on the head exactly as I would have. Better striking here from Nina Ansaroff. My only concern is, what form are we going to see from her coming off of that pregnancy? What kind of potential damage will it do to her body, especially with her being at 34, 35 years old? We saw Mackenzie Dern come back from a baby at 26 years old, 4 months after giving birth to, in fact, and she fell flat in her performance against Amanda Ribas. But again, she was probably outmatched in that fight, regardless whether she had a baby or not. In this one, Nina Ansaroff is jumping right back into the not the sharks per se, but a high-level opponent in Mackenzie Dern here, where she's really going to have to mind her P's and Q's, keep this fight on the feet as best as possible, and then get that jab working from the outside. And she looked a little bit bigger at the weigh-ins, too. I was kind of surprised at how much bigger that she actually looked against Dern, and that should not help Dern at all in terms of trying to secure a takedown here. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Dern trying to pull guard or some Imanari roll or some type of shit, just try to engage that grappling aspect. But I'd be very surprised if we actually saw her pull that off successfully. So I'll be going with Nina Ansaroff to win this fight by decision, picking her apart pretty much from a distance and securing a decision victory. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got 3 fights left, and this is shit show number 2. We got Sam Alvey against Julian Marquez. We got Dumpster Fire King himself, John, obviously, on this fight. We will eventually get to you. We are going to start off with Joe. Joe, how do you like this fight?
Wow. was not super impressed with the performance despite the victory of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was impressed with his call out to Molly Cyrus, who's a real smoke show. But aside from that, I mean, gosh, am I really going to pick Sam Alvey to win this fight? Mr. Counter Striker, Mr. Low score, DraftKings, 62 points in a win. Yeah, I'm probably going to pick Sam Alvey here. I just think that he made the weight. That was the big concern I had, right? Coming back down to middleweight after fighting several years at 205 seems to have been okay with the cut. I think he's the better all-around fighter. He's fought better competition. Yes, he's lost a lot, but he also has his back up against the wall here. He is literally fighting to avoid a pink slip. So give me the guy with more experience. Give me Sam Alvey. I expect a pretty boring decision unless one of his classic counters catches the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I'll take Sam Alvey here, 7.2K on DraftKings. I'll take a flyer simply because if he does kind of catch him with a counter and light him up, maybe he can score some points. And 7.2K, I don't think he's going to be that highly owned. Inversely, I don't think Marquez is going to be that highly owned either. He's got a pretty hefty price tag on him. So I don't really see him being that popular. But give me Sam Alvey to get the upset here.
Yeah, Sam Alvey definitely has his back against the wall here. He's 0-4-1 in his last 5 fights, and hence why I believe he's dropping down to middleweight to hopefully right that wrong. John, give us the synopsis as to why you think Sam Alvey is a good bet.
Yeah, Sam's the side here. So I have one unit on him at plus 145. I might take another unit on him, to be honest. I was hoping it would hit 85. I was actually pretty shocked it kept going up this week. So look, I'm not a Julian Marquez guy. I bet Maki against him last fight. Like, fuck me, right? That was
43 seconds away from a dub.
That was not fun. But yeah, like I look at the fight and like, look, I get the concerns with Alvey. He backs up to the fence. He's low volume. He's just as happy, kind of like John Mcdessey earlier, to give away a close decision as he is to win a close decision. But like, I look at the skills and like, what is Julian Marquez actually better at Alvey then? Like that's the thing for me here, because I don't think he's better at anything. Alvey's got more experience. He's fought better competition. He's the better defensive striker by miles. Their power, Alvey might be the bigger hitter, to be honest. Alvey, people forget because it hasn't happened in a while, but Alvey hits pretty hard and he's a pretty precise counterpuncher. And so it's like, Julian Marquez, where he's had his most successes in the clinch, but Alvey's a pretty good clinch fighter too. He's not going to take him down and sub him, I don't think. And so it's like Marquez basically, to me, has to win this fight either on a knockout, which, I mean, it could happen. I mean, for sure. These are big boys, like swinging heavy leather in there. That can happen. But I don't think it's particularly likely. Alvey's always been fairly durable. Or, just out-busying him. And, like, I kind of think this narrative that Marquez is this really busy guy just isn't accurate. It's not backed up in the stats. When you actually go back and watch, it's 2 years ago now, but you watch his fight with Alessio Di Chirico. He comes out hot in that fight, and he gets cracked coming in on counters twice early in that fight that rock him. And suddenly, all of a sudden, the volume falls off a cliff. And he's being a lot more cautious about coming in. And I think that's going to happen here. He is wide open to get cracked every time he enters the pocket. And Alvey's a fairly precise counter striker, even if he is inactive. And, the reality is Alvey is not an easy guy to look good against. He never has been. Even if you look at this losing streak, outside of the Crute fight, he was beating Nog before he got KO'd. He made Spann and Jung gave them everything they could handle. And I would be pretty confident in a stand-up match in both Spann and Jung against Marquez, to be honest. And those were basically 50-50 fights. And so it's like, ultimately, I think Alvey should be a slight favorite. I actually think he has more finishing upside, if I'm being honest. He's just a more precise striker that probably carries as much power. I don't really understand the love for Marquez other than as an Alvey fade. And let me be clear, I'm not a big Alvey guy. I get the knocks against him. I just look at them and it's like, yeah, fading Alvey is understandable, but you got to look at who you're fading him with, right? And I don't think this is it, boys. I really don't. So, yeah, I'm on Alvey here. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, optically speaking, it's never a good idea to bet on Alvey, considering he always gives up his back foot right off the bat. So he's already at a disadvantage with the judges. But he stays relatively active enough in terms of like throwing the leg kick out there. And then obviously that lead right hook that he has. just ask Ryan Spann, right? He was eating a bunch of them in that fight. But it's definitely very powerful. He does have some power in the hands. Like, it was only 4 fights ago where he was a minus 350 favorite against Antonio Algerio Nogueira because everybody expected him to go out there and just knock him out right away. Unfortunately, he's the one on the bad side, and he's the one that gets knocked out. That starts off 2 straight KO losses for him. But I still believe he has some good durability. He ate some good shots against Jung. He ate some good shots against Spann, and he was still coming forward and actually being competitive in those fights, right? The split decision against Ryan Spann, he could have easily won that fight. The Da Jung fight, he easily could have won that fight if that judge gave it a 10-9 instead of a 10-8 in that round 3. I thought, Alvey stayed in that round long enough or good enough to at least warrant a 10-9. So he could actually be coming off of a win right now. But I like the fact that he's going down to 185. I like the fact that this is the well-suited spot for him. It's not like he was cutting a ton of weight to get down to 185 pounds, right? Like, he was a little bit of a chunkier light heavyweight. He was a little bit of a guy that was actually carrying around a little bit of weight up there. And it was just more so it seemed like he probably just wasn't on the strictest diet, hence why he was able to comfortably make 205 pounds. Whereas now he's just, okay, my back is up against the wall. And here's the most interesting part. The fact that Sam Alvey is 34 years old fucking drives me insane. I don't know how the hell that's even possible, considering he has close to 47 to 48 fights. The guy seems to, like, back in the day, remember, he was on that cowboy streak where he was just jumping in and fight every 2 months or something like that. But now he's taking a little bit more time in between fights. So it's good that he's 34 years old, but he still has a solid 4 or 5 years to go out there and compete. So does he want to do it for Bellator? Does he want to do it for PFL? Probably not. That's probably why he's going down to 185 pounds. But stylistically speaking, yeah, John's on the nail here. I don't see what he does exactly better than Sam Alvey, other than the fact that he doesn't accept the back foot as easily as Sam Alvey here. So I'm expecting Sam to land the bigger, better shots here. He has great takedown defense. So even if Marquez wants to attempt this to take this to the ground, I think he's going to very much struggle there. And then that might start to tax on him. I was not that impressed with him in his last fight against Maki Pitolo. And I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, given the extended layoff that he was coming off of. But, this is a less than a 2-month turnaround. Just getting right back into the saddle, trying to get those fights back under your belt. But I think this is a tough one for him to take. And again, Sam Alvey is like meme-worthy type of fighter, but he still goes out there and he does perform and he does give a good account of himself more often than not. So I do like me some Sam Alvey here. Decent dog spot. I think he could definitely ruin some parlays if everybody's going out there and just parlaying Julian Marquez this weekend. But I do like me some Sam Alvey. Possible for a KO. And a lot of people are saying that Julian Marquez has this granite chin. And yeah, he ate some big shots against Phil Hawes on that Contender Series fight. But just because he ate those big shots in that one fight doesn't lead me to believe that he's going to have this granite chin moving forward. I like Sam Alvey. I'll ultimately say decision. I think that's how he gets it done. Just being a little bit more active, landing the better shots. I'll go Sam Alvey via decision. Brady, how are you seeing this one, buddy?
Man, looks like I'm going to be the odd man out. I'm going with Marquez, and I definitely get all the points. It's just, I think for Sam Alvey to win, it's going to have to be a knockout, which is definitely possible. But we all know what's going to happen in this fight. He's going to back up against the cage. Marquez is going to be coming forward, and I just hate how low volume Sam Alvey is. But maybe the weight drop could be very good for him here. I'm not high on Marquez at all, but just him throwing more volume coming forward, it's a really good look for the judges. And yes, Sam Alvey's very durable. He's been knocked out like 3 times in a ton of fights. Marquez durable himself, but we have seen him hurt. Definitely not betting the minus 170. I think the value probably is on Alvey. A prop I actually like, and although I am picking Marquez to win a volume-based decision, I think Sam Alvey by KO at plus 635 is just crazy. I think if he does win, it's probably that KO, but it's just so hard to pick Sam Alvey, low volume and all that to win a decision. So I'm going to take Marquez to win. Actually, it's going to be his first decision. He has a 100% finish rate, which I don't like as well. But I'm just going to say he comes forward, lands more shots. Alvey's on the back foot, and Marquez wins a really close decision. But just definitely not something I'd bet on. And I do think Sam Alvey is probably the better side. As far as a pick, I'm going to go with Marquez.
Yeah, there's no shame in being on the opposite side of the rest of the panel. I love having different perspectives, which is why I've always wanted to have different guests and different perspectives on this show. So shout out to Brady for actually being the guy on Julian Marquez in the spot. All right, we're in the co-main event spot right now, and this is easily the fight that I'm looking forward to most this weekend, the most competitive fight on the card. There's a lot of ways to dissect this fight. John, I'll let you kick things off here.
Yeah, so this is an interesting fight, right? It's a fun one. I guess it comes down to what do you think of Sadiq, really? Because for Arnold Allen, I like Arnold Allen as a fighter, but I kind of think he's somewhat athletically capped. I think he's capped by his volume as well. He does a lot of things at a strong level, but nothing that I personally think at like a top 5-10 level, whereas some people do think that. He's a quality grappler. He's a capable boxer. He hits pretty hard. But I kind of think, at some point, Allen's going to run into somebody who just, can turn up the volume on him and just win kind of a volume-based decision, and that's going to kind of be a pattern. But, so on the other side, you have Yusuf, who's obviously a great athlete, but he's an electric athlete and he hits hard. I don't actually love Sadiq's game that much. I appreciate how much volume he throws. I appreciate how hard he hits. I appreciate how big he is for the division. But let's be honest here. We saw him get brutally knocked out regionally. And look, I know people talk about the slam. He got hurt bad earlier in that fight before that slam. That's something that doesn't really get talked about. He got wobbled by Gabriel Benitez before he got knocked out there. He got wobbled by Andre Fili. We've seen it a lot. And it's like, I talked about it on my show, but it's like there's almost become this aura around, kind of like with the Dagestani crew, with the same thing with the Nigerian guys. They're like, oh, they all have great cardio, great durability. And it's like, yeah, I get Kennedy and Usman do, but like we haven't really seen that, with Yusuf. And, as far as his cardio goes, it's another thing where it seems like he slows pretty dramatically, we saw it in the Fili fight. He slowed bad going into round 3 of that fight. He looked like he was starting to slow against Mike Davis on Contenders in round 2, but he chewed Davis's leg up so much that, Davis just had nothing come round 3 of that fight. And so, like, I look at this and I'm like, yeah, I think there are going to be spots where Sadiq could put Allen out early in this fight. Lenz had a bit too much success for me to be comfortable betting Allen in the pocket in that fight. He struggled to find it, but when Lenz did get there, he was hitting Allen clean over and over again. And I think there's a chance Sadiq puts him out if he can get in those same spots. And given that he's much bigger than Lenz and, a much better athlete, I suspect he can. Will he put him out? I'm not sure, but I think the opportunity is there. Now, that said, I do think, though, if Sadiq, first of all, Allen's not just going to accept the pocket war. So he's going to have to work for it. If he doesn't get him out, I'm expecting around like 7-8 minute mark, you're going to see a pretty substantial tide turn here where Allen can probably take over this fight. And like I said, I don't think Allen's near the athleticism level of Sadiq, but he hits hard and he's sharp and precise. And if we get to that point where Sadiq starts slowing down, we've seen southpaws. Fili, who almost never fights southpaw, was lighting him up from the southpaw stance. Benitez was lighting him up before he got knocked out. It wouldn't shock me if Allen takes over the fight and starts putting it on him. And so I lean Sadiq because I do think the finishing upside is in his favor, and as is the output upside. But I think his game is flawed enough that if it comes down the stretch here, and if he can't hurt Allen bad enough where he can't capitalize late, he's going to take over this fight. And so, yeah, I think Sadiq should be a slight favorite. No bet, but I'm pumped for this fight.
So you are picking or predicting Sadiq to win this fight. All right. Also, I just want to start this breakdown by saying I think Nigeria doesn't claim Kennedy and Nzechukwu just because he lost to Paul Craig. I'm just saying. He was the only Nigerian fighter to lose during that stretch that Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, Sadiq Yusuf were killing the game. But yeah, this is a great and interesting fight. The thing that I just can't wrap my head around for the Arnold Allen side of things is he's never fought a striker like this, right? Gilbert Melendez used to be the shit like 8 years ago in Strikeforce. He definitely just a shadow of himself coming into the UFC game. So yeah, it was a good win for Arnold Allen in terms of getting a veteran name like that under your belt, but he's just nowhere near what we used to know from him, where he was a great boxer, a guy that would gout these guys into these types of striking affairs, and he was always the one getting the better of them, not in 2018 or 2019 whenever they fought. But I still like Arnold's game, right? He's very disciplined. He's very he has a 67% striking defense rate, which is crazy to think, considering that his style is more so a striking based style. He's always playing around slightly in that pocket area and then getting in and landing his big strikes. A good 1-2 down the middle. He has a nice little jab. I think he might have the slight speed advantage here. I might be off on that, but I think that in terms of the striking, I like, technically speaking, I like what we see from Arnold Allen a little bit more. Sadiq Yusuf definitely throws a lot more heavier strikes in his shots, right? I definitely think that we see him go out there and he's probably more likely to land a bigger blow to potentially put out Arnold Allen out. But it's so hard to overlook the durability issues that we've seen from Yusuf, right? Even though he hasn't had a knockdown recorded against him on UFC stats or anything like that, but he got hurt bad by Mike Davis. He got hurt bad by Gabriel Benitez. But hats off to him because he was able to have the awareness to actually come back and win those fights. Beats Mike Davis by decision. And then he ends up finishing Gabriel Benitez in the same round that he got hurt in. So yeah, he has some great resiliency and a great durability on him. But I wonder what it's going to look like when he's fighting a skilled striker like this in Arnold Allen, who just waits for his moments to pop and ready, waits for those opportunities to really let his hands go. Sadiq Yusuf, another thing, John brought it up, the Andre Feely fight. That's another one where you see him slow down in that third round. And I'm not sure if his coach told him to take the round off or whatever it was. It's just not a good look. You can't take a round off in a 3-round fight, especially in a fight that was like that, right? Like, I don't care how obvious you think you're winning the first 2 rounds. You can't be fighting that closely against a guy like Andre Feely, and especially taking that round off. I think that's an opportunity where we'll see Arnold Allen actually take advantage of that, probably press to action a little bit more and try to get in his face and try to tire him out and probably land on the chin of his. I think that Arnold is probably the slightly crisper striker here. And I think his ability to be patient and wait for Sadiq to kind of throw his shots and see Sadiq start whiffing that air, that's going to frustrate Sadiq. I think that's going to gas him out a little bit more, probably get him more tired than he's been in his past fights. And that's where Arnold should be able to capitalize. I dropped it as one of my favorite props last night on the Propping You Up show, but Arnold Allen by KO at plus 850, I think is an absurd line. I know he has no KO victories in the UFC, but given the durability issues that we've seen from Yusuf, and Yusuf not fighting somebody to this level of striking, at least I believe from Arnold Allen, I think it causes some trouble for him. There is a volume and output concern with Arnold. That's why I'm a little bit concerned about it. But I do think that he actually can go out there and put on a good striking performance here against Yusuf, who seems a little bit more brutish in his approach. Technically good, but like a little bit more brutish, looking to land the bigger and heavier strikes. But I do like Arnold here. I think he outpoints Sadiq on his way to a decision victory here. But I like the underdog money that we're getting, right? Arnold, I believe he was plus 110 earlier in the week. He's only up to plus 130 now. So there is some Sadiq money coming in over the last couple of days, but I'm still ultimately going to side with almighty Arnold Allen. Brady, how are you seeing this one?
Yeah, probably one of the closest fights on the card. I think it's very well matched. And yeah, I mean, you see the advantages for Yusuf. You guys mentioned them. The output is a big one for me, the power advantage as well. But then you see the disadvantages. We've seen him hurt more than once. We've seen him slow down as the fight goes on. I don't love that. This is more of a fight where I just kind of want to sit back and watch 2 very, very good prospects going at it. Such a close fight, even on DraftKings, like 8,500 for Yusuf, 7,700 for Allen there. I don't know how much I'll get because I don't think there's going to be many takedowns in this fight. Maybe Allen can sprinkle in a takedown, but we've seen Yusuf get 0 takedowns in the UFC, which is another concern there. But I think it's going to primarily stay on the feet. I'm going to slightly take Yusuf just for the volume advantage and throwing the harder strikes. But yeah, like you guys mentioned, that the slowing down of Yusuf and that chin is a big concern for me. Yeah, plus 865. I see it by KO. Allen. It's not bad. But yeah, I'm going to take Yusuf. I'm going to take him to win by decision. But ultimately, I don't want any action on this fight. I want to sit back and watch it. One of the better fights on the card here.
That prop actually reminds me of Miguel Baeza versus Takashi Sato with that crazy submission prop line. Just because he didn't hit a submission in the UFC before doesn't mean he's incapable of it, right? I think the same thing is true for Arnold Allen. I know my guy Joe was on that as well. But yeah, I think that's absolutely true that it could absolutely happen at plus 850. It's worth a little bit of a sprinkle. Joe, how do you see this fight going down?
Okay, so one of the credos of DFS MMA players is that you inherently do not like TriStar, and you do not like the point-based fighters that TriStar produces, because it is a death sentence for MMA. Arnold Allen, with all his wins in the UFC, has only broken 80 points once, DK points, and that was 82. Now, at 7.7K, if Arnold Allen decides to use his wrestling, which I hope that his camp is intelligent enough to put a game plan together that at least includes some wrestling and some takedowns, I see that as a path to victory. And I want to see that happen. And at his price point, 7.7K, he could actually get you 10 to 12x in a win by using some wrestling. Because you're right, I don't like the output. I hate the whole TriStar point system of fighters. It's a boring fight. It's typically results in boring fights, not a lot of output. With that said, I'd rather get in the ring against Arnold Allen than either his brother or his father, who are monsters. If you've seen photos of them,
oh yeah,
they are unbelievable monsters. Yusuf, I want to see a few more fights. I mean, he's an athletic freak. He's fought the ghost of a couple of good fighters here, and his wins against Trash Can and I not overly impressed with that. So I'm going to go with the fighter that's got a lot more experience. I'm going to hope that Zahabi puts together a plan that just isn't striking based, and that he actually uses his wrestling and takes advantage of being able to take down Sadif. And at 7.7K, we'll have a few shares of him on DK. In the hopes that I get the 10 to 12x based on some grappling points. I'll probably be underweight to Sadiq. I will have a couple shares, for the potential knockout, even though we haven't seen Allen finish that way. So I will have a few shares there, but I expect to be under-owned on Sadiq, and I'm going to pick Allen to get the win.
All right, it looks like we're finally split here. I think pretty much every single prediction, we had at least 3 guys on one side and 1 guy on the other, but I believe this is the first one where we've had 2 on either side. John, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say, the optimal outcome in this fight is a very fast Sadiq KO and follow up with him going off as a big favorite against Danny Ige or Calvin Kattar and us getting to unload on the other side. That's the optimal outcome.
Look at John thinking about the future. That's the long-term game right there, baby. I don't care if you're backing Arnold Allen. That's a solid look right there. I hear you. I hear you. All right, that brings us to the main event here. We got 185 live viewers at the moment. Make sure you guys hit that like. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe. Shout out to everybody that knows the odds is no longer, and we're the new home for you guys. So I appreciate you guys stopping by and checking us out. All right, let's get right into this main event here. Marvin Vettori taking on the short notice replacing Kevin Holland, who just fought less than 3 weeks ago against Derek Brunson and came up with a very underwhelming performance where he was just not able to get up from under Derek Brunson, even telling his coach in between rounds, "Coach, he's too heavy." Like literally just can't do anything about that fact. And then he's replacing Darren Till, who obviously I believe he has a dislocated collarbone or something like that, whatever it is. Good spot for Holland to quickly come back and try to change the perception of him, right? A lot of people were super high on him going into that Derek Brunson fight, saying then he's going to knock the fuck out of Derek Brunson. He probably could have if he was able to keep the fight vertical, but he just was not able to. Derek Brunson's wrestling was just too good, or Kevin Holland's takedown defense is just that poor, and I believe it's more so the latter than the former there. And I think that Vettori, if he wants to take this approach, which is not typically the approach he takes, he could probably have this wrapped up in a bow early in this first round, at least in terms of how the fight would play out for the majority of the fight, is if he just seeks that takedown right off the bat. Now, I see a lot of people going out there and be like, oh, he didn't attempt many takedowns or any takedowns here against Jack Hermansson. Why? Why would he try to take down Jack Hermansson, who's probably the better grappler there? You have Kevin Holland with so-called a BJJ black belt, but we never see any of it, especially when he's on his back against guys like Darren Stewart, who apparently is Khabib now, because he can take a guy down like Kevin Holland and just stay on top of him for like 3.5 minutes in the ending of a fight. So either it's piss poor takedown defense, which I believe is true, and poor cardio, but I don't want to believe that too much on Kevin Holland's side, because he was still a little bit live in those round 4s and round 5s against Derek Brunson, albeit he was probably just taking a bit of a snoozer on the ground and was able to conserve his energy for when he was actually in those striking realms. Trust me, as a guy that had a plus 150 ticket on Derek Brunson, I was biting my nails every time that fight was on the feet. I was just saying, Derek, shoot, just shoot. I don't care what you're trying to do, trying to show off your new skills and all that. Let's get this fight to the ground and let's take it to a safe place where we're nullifying the risk of Kevin Holland. Now, Marvin Vettori, big brute, probably the juice head of the UFC stable. The guy goes out there and he just has this brash attitude about him and this brash persona. And you definitely see at the weigh-ins today too, where he's just like, I don't know, it looks like he was hulking out almost in front of Kevin Holland, but he brings that type of style to the cage, right? He has this like hard-nosed striking style where he's always kind of moving forward and throwing these big shots. Maybe not technically the best striking that you'll ever see out of anybody, but still effective enough to kind of wilt his opponent and always, make it look like he's winning in the judges' scorecards. And that's more often than not what's important here. I think if he just tries to take this fight to the ground, he's going to have it wrapped up pretty easily here. Not saying that he's going to finish him in the first round or anything like that, but just demoralize him right off the bat. I've been liking the persona that we've been seeing from Kevin Holland this week. It seems like he's taking things a little bit more serious, but that doesn't really mean anything if you can't get anything going in the cage itself. You can be the biggest badass outside the cage, but if you can't stop a takedown, what are you going to do? I think we'll see a little bit more of a motivated Holland who has a good striking account of himself in this fight. But I think that Vettori clearly going to be the more physical guy. He should be able to wrap him up, either take him down, push him up against the cage, whatever it is, nullify the striking, the distance striking of Kevin Holland. And I think we'll see Vettori pull away with this fight. I'm kind of torn on the method of victory. I don't know if he'll be able to finish him maybe round 3 or round 4 via some ground and pound of some sort, or even a submission, or if he goes out there and just pulls off a decision victory. I'm not 100% sure, but I am on the Vettori train. I understand why he's a minus 300 favorite, and I've always been a guy that's been banging the drum that I believe that Kevin Holland is slightly overrated. I just think that people love him a little bit too much. I think he has a lot that leaves to be desired here, and I think that Vettori can absolutely capitalize on it. The last thing I'll say about this matchup, you do not want to hear a guy say right after he loses a fight, I'm here to have fun, not chase championships. These guys are trying to chase championships. who's chasing the championship harder than fucking Marvin Vettori right now? Probably nobody. That guy is on a mean streak right now to try and get a title shot. And I think he's going to not run over Kevin Holland here, but I think he'll dominate this fight pretty easy from minute 1 to if it takes to minutes 25. So I'm taking Marvin Vettori. Brady, how do you got this one?
Yeah, I mean, if Marvin Vettori wins, it's going to be a good night for me. I'm really invested in him. I bet him straight, but more towards the opener. I got him at minus 188. And where the line's at now, although I agree a little bit, I think it's just a little bit disrespectful, minus 335 for Vettori. So if you got in early, good to you. And then I also have in a parlay with Joe Solecki. So it's safe to say if Vettori gets it done, it's going to be a good night for me. But yeah, I really like Vettori in this matchup quite a bit. You kind of mentioned it. Kevin Holland, he could be slightly overrated. A lot of people think he's like this murderous power puncher, but you kind of go through all of his UFC wins and losses, and he has, I think, 3 knockout losses, one over Jacare Souza, who is 40 years old, not a great chin, one over Buckley, who came in on short notice, doesn't have a great chin, has been knocked out 2 or 3 times, and then against Anthony Hernandez, somebody that arguably shouldn't be in the UFC, although he did get that win against Rodolfo Vieira. But yeah, I think his power is a little bit overrated here. And Marvin Vettori, he's never been dropped in the UFC, never been knocked down. Has a very good chin. I don't think I've ever seen him hurt. And this guy has a good chin. Both guys do. But the writing is written on the wall for this fight. Kevin Holland, 51% takedown defense. A lot of people did not know about that takedown defense until the last fight when he kind of got exposed. But all Vettori has to do is come in here, get the takedowns, and I think he should make this look pretty easily. I think he will strike with Holland a little bit. And outside of Holland getting a KO, which I think that's very unlikely with how durable Vettori is. And like I said, I think the power is slightly overrated for Kevin Holland. I think Vettori cruises to a pretty easy decision, just mixing in the takedowns when you need to. If he is in trouble, go to the takedowns. And I think a sub is actually live. But as far as DraftKings goes, I know that Vettori is the highest priced on DraftKings, 9,600. But I think if he comes in here with the game plan of getting takedowns, control time, I think that's all going to add up. And Marvin Vettori is going to be my highest own on DraftKings. I have a parlay and I have him straight. So if Marvin Vettori gets it done, it should be a fairly good night. I'm fairly confident in that as well.
I guess it's Red Patty night in the Brady household if he's able to get the victory that night, hopefully by a 5-round dominant decision victory. Joe, are you on the same boat as us?
Well, I heard Vettori's only half Italian. He's also half Polish, which means he made himself an offer he couldn't understand. So when, I just hope that Vettori doesn't get too cocky. Like, that's my only concern here. It's like, with you, it's so funny, Locke, when you were talking about, having your ticket on Brunson, and as much as he was dominating that fight, whenever it started standing, I just got really nervous because I ended up having a really good card as well. And I'm like very nervous because I saw him getting hit and getting lit up when he stood striking with Kevin Holland. Now, I don't know that, I think that Vettori's faster than Brunson and is not going to get hit as much, but I really want to see him stick with the game plan and not get cocky and not get overly emotional and let Kevin Holland get into his head. That is the reason why we'll have a few shares of Kevin Holland, not to mention he's 6.6K on DraftKings. So you could do a lot if you build a lineup or two with Kevin Holland. But like Brady, I'm pretty invested. I'm going to be pretty invested with Vettori. And I was going to be a lot more invested when I had my girl Erin Blanchfield in all my lineups at 6.9K. Now I'm going to have to look elsewhere. But I'm on Vettori here. No bets as of yet, but I do expect to use him in DraftKings. 9.6K. Again, there's a lot of risk there. I mean, it is a 5-round fight. We should get some grappling points. Maybe a finish. He could certainly earn salary. Very safe in cash, I would think. But yeah, I'm in on Vettori here.
John, bring us home, baby.
Yeah, so you want to know why there'll always be an edge betting MMA. Take a look at the line with Kevin Holland against a better wrestler 2 weeks ago where he was minus 190. And now let's flip it forward 2 weeks and he's plus 275. Now, I'm not saying he is the value side, by the way, but I am saying, kind of to Brady's point, no one really realized the takedown defense thing, even though it was right there on paper and he was minus 190. Public always tends to gravitate to whatever the narrative is. And I'll be honest, that scares me a little bit here just because it's like, everybody was all in on him a couple weeks ago. Now everybody's all out on him. It seems like everybody's on Vettori. Like I said, it's not a rational fear because sometimes everybody is right, and it's not like this is something where the line's sitting at minus 150 and everybody's betting Vettori and it's not moving. It's up at minus 330. But more or less, I do think the line is right. My concern is more, we all kind of touched on it. If Vettori does screw around at all, I do think Holland has a substantial striking edge in this fight, to be honest. And I think he will hit him clean a lot in space. But that said, I have to imagine if Vettori gets stung, he's going to start grappling. And while I do think Brunson is the better wrestler, I'm fairly certain of that and is generally more willing to attempt takedowns. What I will say is this. People don't seem to realize it. Like I said it before he fought Hermanson on my podcast that Vettori was the better grappler. And people were like, you're crazy. And it's like, no, Vettori is a serious, serious grappler. If Vettori gets on top of you, like with ACJ gone now, he literally might be the best grappler at minus 185 pounds. When Vettori gets on top of you, things go hairy in a hurry. And so what I'm looking at here, look, I have a little bit of worries about him screwing around in space, but ultimately I do think at some point he's going to take the path of least resistance. And what I do think is an interesting bet here is the inside the distance on Vettori plus 125. Look, we saw Kevin Holland get put in some real bad spots against Gerald Mearshart. We saw him get put in some real bad spots and finished by Brendan Allen. We saw Jacare take him down and put him in a bad spot almost immediately. He gets put in bad spots pretty much routinely. And now he's dealing with something with Vettori, who isn't just a submission threat. He's got serious ground and pound. And if he gets Holland's back, look, I get he looks like this big meathead, but like I said, he's a slick grappler. I kind of think if Vettori is taking the path of least resistance, he's not Derek Brunson. He's not going to lay in his guard. He's going to end up fucking him up and finishing him. Like that, I really believe that. And so it's like, you're telling me it's plus 120, because Vettori minus 330 doesn't make sense if he doesn't grapple at all. That makes zero sense. And so you're telling me he's going to grapple heavily and he's plus 125 to finish inside the distance? That makes absolutely no sense to me. I think he's going to finish Holland, to be honest. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to be a late finish. I think it's going to happen pretty quickly after he starts grappling. So I think Vettori is the pick here. I think inside the distance is a nice play at plus 125. I'm going to say Vettori round 2 submission.
All right, we got a consensus pick on the main event here, and it's pretty obvious, right? You got minus 335 on Vettori here, so it's pretty easy to go with him. But once you look at it stylistically, it absolutely makes sense. All right, that brings us to the end here. I do want to remind you guys, next week, we're actually going to have a little bit of an odds reunion. I'm going to have Clint from Die Hard MMA Podcast. We're going to have Bleed from the MMA, or Bleed MMA, whatever his fucking Twitter handle is. And then we're going to have MMA Prediction Guru on here as well. So make sure you guys tune in for the Ultimate Weigh-In Show next week as well. I will throw it around the horn here so that everybody can plug in their stuff. And at the same time, your boy has to have a nice little graphic to end off the show. So we will have everybody's picks posted up here so that everybody can actually know what we're all on here. I believe I got everything right. If I don't have anything right, make sure you guys let me know. But as we're going around the horn, you guys can absolutely go over here and see what we actually ended up picking. So first and foremost, Brady, where can everybody find you?
Hey, that graphic's sweet. I like that. But yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. YouTube is DFS by the numbers. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Locke. It was a fun show. Tons of knowledge on this panel. It was awesome. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of it, and hopefully make some money tomorrow. But yep, good luck to everybody in the chat. Good luck to you, Sun Tzu, John, and Locke. And hopefully it's a good morning for us tomorrow.
For sure. Joe, what do you got to plug? I know you don't have much.
I don't really have anything to plug, so I want to tell a really quick Canadian joke. Just to just to kind of set the tone here. So real quick, the Pope, he visits Canada, right? Takes a tour. Prime Minister says, you know what? I'm going to get you a chauffeured car. I'm going to let you drive around the country, see some of the scenery. Pope's in the car for like 20 minutes, taps the chauffeur on the shoulder and says, look, man, I never get to drive. They never let me drive in Italy. I would really love to drive. So chauffeur says, what am I going to do? Say no to the Pope? So he goes into the front seat. Pope starts driving. He's got a little bit of a heavy foot. Starts speeding. So a Canadian Mountie pulls him over. Looks inside the car and says, oh, shit. Calls his lieutenant and says, I think we got a problem here. I pulled the car over for speeding, and there's a VIP in the car. And the lieutenant goes, VIP? Is this person more important than me? And the troop Mountie says, I think so. Lieutenant says, is the VIP more important than the Prime Minister? Mountie says, yeah, I think so. Well, who is he? Guy's like, I don't know, but you should see he's got the Pope as his chauffeur.
I know that's something that we can always guarantee Joe is going to come through. It's just a nice elaborate joke to kind of take us home. I fucking love it.
At Sun Tzu on Twitter. That's it, man. That's all I do, Twitter.
God, I love you, Joe. I love you, Joe. John, where can everybody find you? Do your plug Platforms.
Yeah, guys, you can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox, and it's FAWKES. Don't ask. And I'm a co-host of the Club and Sub podcast. We go live every Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time. You can find our channel on YouTube at the Club and Sub podcast. So yeah, if you like it, please drop a like, subscribe, and also like this show and subscribe. If there's 180 people in chat, there better be 180 likes on here.
Oh my God, that is diehard MMA territory right there.
But
180 people viewing, man. That is awesome.
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
It was
no
great.
worries, brother. The Club and Sub podcast, as John was saying, a very good podcast. I do have a couple of their hosts and co-hosts lined up for future podcasts, so do look out for the Club and Sub guys. Those guys are slowly taking over the game. I truly respect them, and they're a great group of guests. All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys for joining on the show. We're pretty much wrapping this up right in time for Bader versus Machida, so make sure you guys go check that out. Good luck on your bets this weekend. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you guys next week. Once again, 9 p.m. Eastern, the Ultimate Weigh-In Show. Peace out, guys.
Peace.
See ya.